Hey everybody, tonight we're debating evolution and we are starting right now with Benjamin and NephilimFree's opening statement. Thanks so much for being with us and the floor is all yours.
Okay, so I'm going to start us off. Hopefully, I'll take about 5 minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Neff because I know he has a lot more talking points. I'm going to make one specific point and then a few side points off it. So I don't, in total, think that the evolutionary theory is impossible in all senses. I also don't think it's unreasonable in all senses, but I definitely think certain components of it are unreasonable. And so that is where I'm going to start with the odds of, and let me do a share screen real quick. So please pardon, I'm sharing an Excel sheet that I just built, and so it is terribly choppy. So I'm just walking you through this to show the math that I did. So I'm going to calculate the odds of an amino acid chain coming together so that we can progress from a single-celled bacteria up to a human, and based on the size of their genomes and whatnot. So with how objects are arranged and whatnot, the numbers go up very quickly with unlike objects, but we've got 20 base pairs, 20 amino acids that are built from the different codons and whatnot. I didn't include the stops. I think I should have, so it should have been 21. Either way, once you get up above 20, then you get into the part where it really slows down the total smaller differences are made each time, but the differences are still going to be pretty substantial. So let's jump into that. So if we just have one amino acid, then there's only one possible combination, and that's down here in the results. Again, this is terribly janky as an Excel sheet. I build them partially for a living, so I made this very quickly, so I do apologize. And if it's unclear, I'll talk about whatever I need to on it. So that's one, and this is just for all those viewing. With two, there's 2 pairs available. So then once you get up to 3, well, now there's 6 pairs available. Once you get up to 25, once you get up to 5, there's 120 available. So down here, I'm making some assumptions, and they're pretty generous assumptions. I'm not taking a lot of things into consideration with this amino acid chain, such as left-handed and right-handed amino acid pairs, as well as the fact I think for the human genome, there's 9 essential amino acids, which makes the whole situation more complicated. So I'm leaving all of that out. 1, because I don't know all the nuance of it, and 2, because this is actually a far more generous number I'm going to be going with. So based on the current number of estimated bacteria in the earth today, so that's what I'm going off of. I assume there'd be far less back in the day when this was happening. We have, and I didn't put in exponents, I left it with all the zeros just to be more of a visual effect to show how incredibly large these numbers are. I think this is 5 undecillion. That's roughly how many bacteria are on the earth today, with a reproduction rate of 5 minutes. And that's with every one of them reproducing every 5 minutes. So that's a perfect reproduction rate. And this is going to be more of a recycle rate. We're not going to have 5 and then 10 and then 15. It's always going to be 5 even reproducing into 5 more and so on. So with a 5-minute reproduction rate and a mutation rate per generation of 0.003, so of every 1,000 specimens, 3 of them will have some kind of significant mutation. That is going to give us, from this whole total picture that I painted, and again, very sloppy, so I do apologize. It's going to give us a rate per minute of, I don't think this is the same thing, it's like octillion. And then the rate per year, this is how many mutations are taking place per year. So coming up here to our calculator, if I take our amino acids in this amino acid chain, let's take it up to 35, and I jump down here. Here I have how many seconds it takes to acquire that amino acid chain based on the odds. So even with this incredible number of possibilities in that amino acid chain, we're still going to reach that in about 10 seconds. So that's pretty fantastic. Well, if we take that up to 50, now we're almost up to a day. Okay, well, that's not a very big change. Jump up to 80. Well, that's down. Up to 80. Well, now we start running into problems. Not only does the evolutionist have to decrease their font size to get their total result, we're already up to 630 million years to acquire that chain. And this is only 80 links of the chain. If we take this up to 100, we have now surpassed again, we have to decrease the font size. We've now surpassed the timeline that evolution allows for. We're up to 18 trillion years just to acquire, by random chance, an amino acid chain that is 100 links long. And then down here, if we go into the DNA structure of the bacteria have roughly 7 million base pairs in their being. Human beings have 3 billion base pairs, which means that human beings have roughly 2.993 billion more base pairs than bacteria. So this, and a lot of that is not only going to be morphological changes, but also anatomic changes. So all of those changes have to happen in a time of I think it's like 3.4 billion or something, from bacteria to humans. All of those changes have to happen within roughly 3.5 million years. And for just 100 changes, it's taking us 18 trillion years to get there, which is that's part of the thing that I see as absurd, is the timelines that are thrown into this. And again, I'm leaving some critical factors out of this. This is assuming you can just jam amino acids together and make it work. There's certainly a lot more detail and finesse to actually putting these together. So this is very generous, and it just does not seem feasible for the whole picture of evolution. And again, I will give credit where it's due as we're having a discussion. There are things we can observe. I would call that reasonable evolution based on what we can actually see, what we can actually test. And then instead of micro macro evolution, I would call it reasonable and unreasonable evolution. This is an example of what I see as an unreasonable claim of evolution, just in the whole picture. Now, with this being said, I'm going to kind of diverge from evidences. James, what is my time at? I'm at 11 minutes. Holy cow. Well, that took way longer than I expected, so I'm going to turn it over. Oh, okay. Well, then I'll try to jam this into 1 minute. From a theological position, even if evolution is true, the whole picture of evolution, including timelines and whatnot, even if evolution is true from a creationist standpoint, if we can fit that into the Bible, which people can make a case for how that can fit into the Genesis story, I think that is very unlikely. But if it does, if evolution is true, it does not have the ability to remove God from the equation. Because if we have reasonable evolution, stuff we can see and test, well, God is required to have gotten us to a point of complexity where the evolutionary changes we see can actually happen. And if unreasonable evolution is true, it literally requires a miracle for it to work out. And I just realized I'm still sharing my screen. I've been talking this whole time thinking I was looking at the camera. So that is where I am going to leave it, and I will turn it over to Neph.
Okay, so great. Thank you. That was a great presentation. Yes, the protein evolution story just is implausible. Let me get my screen share working here. Let's see here. Okay. Now, let's see if I can screen share. There we go. Okay, so evolution is a 19th century myth that's based on philosophy and promoted as science. Charles Darwin wrote his book On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection and or the Preservation of the Favored Races in the Struggle of Life in 1859. In 1869, Friedrich Miescher, a Swiss biologist and a researcher, discovered the DNA molecule exactly 10 years after Darwin wrote his book. Darwin did not know, and no scientist knew in the days of Darwin, of the existence of DNA. It was not known. It was discovered 10 years later. Forward to 1929, we have J.B.S. Haldane, who put forth the primordial soup theory and was one of the co-founders of the neo-Darwinian evolution theory. Darwin believed some really weird ideas about evolution because his science was rudimentary in his day. In 1929, J.B.S. Haldane put forth the idea of neo-Darwinism. That is, because it had been discovered since Darwin that DNA is a package of information that prescribes the features of living things. That is, it's an instruction manual for manufacturing the stinger in the tail of a scorpion, the eye of an osprey, the liver of a chimpanzee, etc. It is the instruction manual to manufacture and operate those features. It is exactly what the organism is the information in the DNA, because that was discovered by experimentation. Evolutionists like Haldane put forth the idea that, well, it must be mutation to DNA that produces evolutionary change. In other words, accruing mutations build the information that builds the features of living things. And so physiological novelties arose in the body plans of living things that turned into, over time, a liver, a kidney, a heart, a lung, a leg, a digit, a muscle, a bone. And that's what the evolution theory became. Because if evolution theory had been true, it would be necessary that random mutations building upon each other cooperatively built the information that specifies new things. Evolution theory is a theory of the arrival of things. You can't have an organism that had the information to make all the features of all the living things and then express them. That's not possible, even under evolution theory. If evolution theory had been true, then genetic mutations would have had to have accrued cooperatively to build the information that specifies new structural designs in biology. New physiological features would arise. Now, so we've gone through Haldane. This idea became known as the new synthesis. The idea that random mutations acted upon by natural selection, selected for by natural selection, is what built all the features of all the living things. J.B.S. Haldane and his kind were the ones who put this idea forth. That was called the new synthesis. It failed. In the 2000s, all the evolutionist scientists have agreed that the new synthesis has failed. It is not true that random mutation selected by natural selection is the mechanism for allegedly for evolutionary change. All major university professors in genetics and biology, evolutionists, agree. The new synthesis has failed. And so they've come up with what they call the third way. And all the third way is packaging new ideas like genetic recombination and phenotypic plasticity, synergetic epistasis, and other philosophical, non-scientific, philosophically based ideas added to the evolution, to the modern synthesis, to try to resurrect the modern synthesis. So what Darwin said for 70 years was wrong. What Meissner discovered was put forth by Burton, Haldane and his kind 70 years ago, and it was wrong. And they were telling us it was true for 70 years. Now they've come up with the third way, because the second way didn't work either. So neo-Darwinianism has failed. The evolutionist scientists of this world, evolutionary biologists agree unanimously. The neo-Darwinianism failed. And they've come up with the third way. So for every time the evolutionary theory comes up against modern science, it fails. And for what they've been telling us all this time was wrong, and they admit it. So they come up with a new model, and it too is a failure. It never was true. Now, 1 million studies in the observable effects of mutation have been conducted since Haldane's time in the 1930s. 1 million. If you printed them with a printer and stacked them, they'd be multiple stories tall. Scientists have mutated organisms to numerous generations and observed the effects, and never have they observed cooperative mutations build genetic information or cause or the arrival of any physiological novelty in any increment in any species. It is a myth from the 1930s that mutation is a mechanism for the novel physiological features to arise. And if that doesn't continuously happen, evolution is not true. What modern science has discovered is that DNA is a four-dimensional package of forward and reverse reading, strand hopping, highly compressed, overlapping and nested, algorithmically operating, linguistically functional, prescriptive functional information. Functional information is a product only of intelligence. It cannot arise from material processes. Algorithms are step-by-step procedures designed to accomplish a goal, which is conceived beforehand. It requires forward thinking and can only come from minds. DNA operates algorithmically. There are numerous DNA genetic algorithms. From the secular journals, we see this paper, The Linguistics of DNA, Words, Sentences, Grammar, Phonetics, and Semantics, published by Rutgers University. It's been known for 15 years that DNA is linguistic. It operates with linguistics, including semiotics. Recently, the Karolinska Institute of Sweden discovered that the grammar of the genetic information is more complex than that of any spoken human language. From this paper, the dichotomy in the definition of prescriptive information, the scientists admit that genetic information operates linguistically and algorithmically. This is only one of numerous science papers. It's now become norm. Prescriptive information, it's understood and it's not argued against. Nobody argues that it's not true that DNA operates linguistically and algorithmically. This paper, published in 2012 or 16, 2005, states genetic algorithms instruct sophisticated biological organization. That's the first line in the abstract. Genetic algorithm. I'm sorry?
1 minute left.
Genetic algorithms instruct sophisticated biological organization. If that's true, evolution cannot be true. Because algorithms, functional information, and linguistics are products only of minds. They require forward thinking. They cannot be produced by material processes. Therefore, evolution theory is philosophy. It cannot be true. Because science has verified it cannot be true. These products are only produced by minds. And from this paper, biological organisms are considered to be controlled and regulated by functional information, which functional information comes closer to expressing the intuitive and semantic sense of the word information than mere Shannon combinatorial uncertainty and reduced uncertainty. The innumerable attempts that have been made to reduce the functional information of genomics to molecular biology to nothing more than physiological combinatorics will fail for reasons best summarized in the peer-reviewed paper. So, in other words, all theories of evolution that nature has produced this information will fail.
Thank you for those opening statements from both NephilimFree and Benjamin, and very excited to kick it over to Erika, YouTube's favorite daughter, as well as Reason to Doubt, Jordan. Want to let you know, first though, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics, and we hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you are from. And so with that, thanks so much for being with us, Erika and Reason to Doubt. The floor is all yours.
All right, I'm going to be starting, and I'm going to be sharing my screen starting now-ish. You see it?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, my name is Jordan, and today I'm going to be talking about evolution versus creation or intelligent design. Now, I'm aware that this isn't a dichotomy. Evolution being false doesn't mean that design by deity is true and vice versa. But since these two options represent the opinions of everyone involved today, we'll just pretend that those are the only two options. And before I dive in, a disclaimer. I am an engineer. I am not a biologist. Evolution is nowhere remotely close to my expertise. I try to get my biology from biologists, and you should all do the same. If I mess something up or get something wrong, assume it's because I'm an idiot and not because actual scientists don't know the answer. But being an engineer gives me some insight into design. Designing solutions to problems is literally an engineer's job. Since the creationist wants to assert that there's a sort of divine engineer, let's see if that matches up with what we know about design. Now, as with all good engineering discussions, we need to first start with some assumptions. First, I'm assuming this divine engineer is vastly more intelligent and powerful than humans and is generally competent. Any being sufficiently advanced to design all life should be sufficiently advanced to do a good job at it. Relatedly, I'm assuming that the designer does not have any meaningful constraints in terms of materials, whatever. They can mix, match, add things, whatever. Next, all design is goal-oriented. What may be sloppy design for one goal may be great design for another. Unfortunately, this is part of where creationism fails as scientific. The creator is ill-defined with features and goals that are not really nailed down. For today's purposes, though, I have to assume something, so I'll assume that at a minimum, the divine engineer has the goal of creating self-replicating life, including at least some intelligent life. So with this in mind, I think it's fair to say that we can look at our two models as being between intelligent design, where we'd expect good design, and evolution, where we'd expect good enough design. But what is good design anyway? Well, there are tons of design philosophies, but just about any engineer you ask will agree that good designs have at least three things in common. They're simple, which means the opposite of complicated. Sometimes complication is unavoidable, but simpler is better. They're also efficient, meaning they don't expend resources that aren't necessary to accomplish a goal. And lastly, they actually accomplish the goal that they set out to accomplish. Now, applying this to our two models, we should expect a divine engineer would make things more like the light switch. It's a good design. It's simple and efficient. You flip the switch, boom, the light is on. Evolution, on the other hand, will sometimes get a light switch, but other times it'll just be good enough. Engineering like what you see on the right. It does get the light bulb turned on, but it's needlessly complicated and hopelessly inefficient. Sometimes evolution will work that way. So let's look at a few examples of these principles in action, and we're going to start this with this adorable little fuzzball, the golden mole. This guy isn't actually a mole. He's not in the family of true moles, but we won't hold that against him. Now, golden moles live in sub-Saharan Africa, and they mostly eat bugs. This cute little face might be hiding something. You might notice it's odd. There's no eyes. The eyes are still there, but they're completely covered by skin and fur. They still work. The moles can detect light and dark with them, but they're definitely hampered by being covered up. So are these a good design? Clearly not. They're not simple. While the eyes are functional, they're way more complicated than they need to be. Simple amoeba and such have light-sensitive patches that can fulfill the same function of detecting light and dark, but they're not nearly that complicated. These eyes are also criminally over-designed in their present state. Building out a fully functional eye and then immediately covering it up with fur, that kind of waste would get any engineer fired. This doesn't fit with a sort of divine intelligence, but it fits evolution perfectly. The golden mole's ancestors had eyes that were fully functioning, but they weren't necessary in their subterranean lifestyle. Being covered by skin and fur made them less susceptible to injury, etc. And thus the golden mole was born. So now let's go under the sea. Some mammals, such as dolphins and whales, live their entire lives in the water, yet they must still breathe air. That requires them to come to the surface periodically to suck in a giant gulp of air before they submerge again. Suffocation is a real issue for these mammals, particularly newborn calves. If they never make it to the surface, they suffocate and die. Now, this is arguably a straight-up design flaw. The problem of requiring an exchange of gases while underwater has already been solved because gills exist. Even if the designer had a very good reason for some reason wanting aquatic animals to have lungs, that wouldn't preclude gills as well, particularly for newborns. Other animals have used precisely that solution. Of course, this makes perfect sense as a good enough design. The ancestors of these creatures didn't have gills, so they don't either. That wouldn't be an obstacle for a divine engineer, though. Nothing would stop this divine engineer from just grabbing a good solution that he already had made from a completely different animal and slapping it onto a whale. But evolution can't do that, and that's why we don't see it. Now, finally, I'll end with a crowd favorite, the recurrent laryngeal nerve. This is the nerve that branches from the vagus nerve that goes from your brain all the way down in your chest. The RLN's primary job is to innervate the larynx, and that's all the way up in your throat. To get back there, it loops under the aortic arch, then goes all the way back up your neck, making that trip way longer than it needs to be. Now, as bad as that is in humans, the problem is blown to laughable proportions in giraffes. Their RLN does exactly the same thing, except it turns a trip that could have been a few centimeters into a trip of several meters. Now, it's easy to see this is not good design. It is far from simple. The RLN does have valuable functions all the way down there in the chest, but those functions could have easily been done by another nerve. It is obviously grossly inefficient. If that nerve has to get to the larynx, just do it on the way down, like you're right there. The reason that this happens in reality is it has to do with our evolutionary history. And our distant ancestors, the heart was very close to the origin of the nerve, so a small loop around it wasn't a big deal. Over time, though, the distance got stretched out and stretched out and stretched out, leading to the hopeless mess we have today. This is the epitome of good enough engineering. Now, the list could go on and on, from vestigial limbs, mammalian yolk sacs, to vitamin C deficiencies in primates, et cetera, but there can be little doubt that reality appears to be full of good enough design. Now, this doesn't mean that it wasn't designed at all. Maybe the intelligent being designed, intelligent beings designed suboptimally. There are suboptimal designs made by intelligence. Perhaps the designer of us was incompetent or malicious or just lazy. All of those things are possible, but at the very least, that puts a significant constraint on what the designer could be like. And it ends up getting to be so many constraints that it looks like it's impossible to distinguish from no designer at all. And if we don't need a designer to explain what we see, then why not make our model simpler and just cut it out? Our design doesn't need that feature. And that's me, and I'll turn it over to my partner.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let me share my screen. I apologize if my voice gives out or anything like that today. I'm a little bit sick. I've got a bit of a cold. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
All right. James, how much time do I have? Could you tell me that?
You have 9 minutes and 47 seconds.
Very cool. Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and start. Okay. My name's Erika. That's a Gibbon. I'm here with Jordan to discuss evolution and its robusticity. I am currently a PhD student in biological anthropology, so I study human evolution and primate evolution at the graduate level. I got my master's degree in primatology, so this is going to be fairly primate-centric. Now, as a preface, very quickly, this is a discussion that is for fun. In the broader world, this is not up for debate. We're discussing how cool evolution is, or maybe potential areas where it could be doing better. But evolution is more accepted than ever, not just in the scientific community, but also at large. As of right now, only 18% of people in the United States accept young Earth creationism, or that evolution doesn't actually occur. But evolutionary theory is, it's been argued by many that it's actually one of the most robust theories in science, period. Now, it's supported by every relevant field. I feel comfortable saying that, but particularly what I'm going to be going over here is statistics, genetics, and paleontology/geology. Now, evolution makes a couple of very simple predictions. And as we all know, predictions are the gold standard of science. So within statistics, evolution predicts that all organisms should converge on a common ancestor. Within genetics, evolution predicts that more related organisms should share more genetically than less related organisms. And in paleontology and geology, evolution predicts simply that the fossil record should display slow morphologic change over geologic time in response to changes in the environment. So the first thing I want to bring up is this excellent paper from 2016 titled Statistical Evidence for Common Ancestry, Application to Primates. Now, what these guys did is really cool. They essentially took a couple different lines of evidence: morphology of living and extinct primates, genetics. So they examined about 54 genes across about 180 different species of primates. And then they looked at biogeographical evidence, and they wanted to test common ancestry against species-separate ancestry. So someone created all the different species of primates separately, and family-separate ancestry. So someone created all the different families of primates separately. And this is taken from their discussion. Every test of species-separate ancestry that we applied to the primates suggested that this model does a very poor job of explaining actual biological data as compared to common ancestry. Many of these data sets reject species-separate ancestry strongly. The probability of obtaining a test statistic more extreme than the one observed under species-separate ancestry model being incredibly small, often approaching or greatly exceeding the probability of picking up the correct atom at random among the estimated 10 to the 80th atoms in the known universe. This uniform and strong signal arises in part due to the large number of primate species for which data are available. So they effectively found that there is no way, mathematically speaking, that you can explain the data set that we see in the morphology, biogeography, and genetics of all primates, including humans, of course, us being great apes or hominoids, by appealing to separate ancestry. It's simply not going to work. And to go back again, you should be able to recognize that by looking at these infinitesimal p-values here over to the right. I mean, we're at 7 times 10 to the, negative 1,791st. This is some pretty intense stuff. But genetics are important in more ways than just our similarity to the other panins and the rest of the panins and the rest of the hominoids, although that is important. When referring to the entire genome, we're of course 96% similar to humans, or humans are 96% similar, to chimpanzees and bonobos. And when we refer to just coding base pairs, this number rises to 98.8% similar. Okay, cool. We all know that. But evolution makes this prediction that in accordance with it, humans and chimps should share progressively less in common genetically with organisms outside the primate order than the mammalian class, than the animal kingdom, respectively. And this is important because humans are, of course, most closely related to chimps, but they are actually most closely related to us as well. They share more genetically when looking at a full genome comparison with humans than they do to gorillas. So this is quite interesting. And this is, of course, confirmed when we look at organisms and their protein sequences. This is called beyond reasonable doubt evolution from DNA sequences. We demonstrate quantitatively, let me move this out of the way, that as predicted by evolutionary theory, sequences of homologous proteins from different species converge as we go further back in time. The converse, a non-evolutionary model, can be expressed as probabilities, and the test works for chloroplast, nuclear, and mitochondrial sequences, as well as for sequences that diverged at different time depths. Even on our conservative test, the probability that chance could produce the observed level of ancestral convergence for just one of the 8 data sets of 51 proteins is 1 times 10 raised negative 19, and combined over 8 data sets is 1 times 10 raised negative 132. So once again, there is no way to look at the data set of life, the biodiversity that we see today, and come to the conclusion that these organisms are not all related to one another. And if a creationist wants to draw a line somewhere and say, well, some organisms are related and others are not, then they have to present where that line is drawn and why it is drawn there. So statistics demonstrate that only common ancestry explains the patterns we see in biology. Can mutation really cause such massive change? The answer is yes. Human-specific RGAP11B increases size and folding of primate neocortex in the fetal marmoset. So what these guys did here in this paper that I'm about to go over is they looked at humans and they said humans have a partial duplication of this special gene called RGAP11A. All primates have RGAP11A. Only humans have a partial duplication of it that results in RGAP11B. And what this gene does is it helps send a bunch of extra neurons, stem cells, actually, that go and become neurons during development. So they said, well, what if we take the human gene and we stick it in a marmoset, which is a New World monkey? And this is what they found. The marmoset's brain increased in surface area by 3 times. So small genetic changes can lead to big phenotypic outcomes that can then be selected for within an environment. But we can also see this with entire proteins. The de novo gene evolution of the antifreeze glycoproteins in codfishes revealed by whole genome sequence data. So this codfish actually has a brand new protein in it that allows it to swim in colder waters without its blood freezing. But paleontology and geology additionally corroborate the ideas of evolutionary theory, and they do so in a beautiful way. We know the Earth is very ancient. This is because of the radioactive decay law, which is just a law in physics. There's no getting around that. And in fact, $257 billion industries depend on this fact because all of the fossil fuel industry and energy industry depends on radiometric dating to do basin modeling and actually find fossil fuels. This is something you can find on most of their websites, interestingly enough.
So does 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Okay, cool. Thank you, James. So does evolution actually pan out here? Do we see slow morphologic change or organisms changing over geologic time as evolution would predict? And the answer is a resounding yes. I work with hominins specifically. So here are roughly 10 hominins, right? And what we see is slow morphologic change over geologic time, from the size of the brow ridge to the dentition to the palate, to the brain case size, to the size of the orbits. And if you saw the postcrania, you would see the emergence of bipedality and associated features slowly emerging there as well, from the less bipedally efficient Ardipithecus ramidus or Australopithecus afarensis to the incredibly efficient bipeds in late genus Homo. And another good example is looking at the involucrum in whale evolution. So this little critter up there at the top is called Indohyus. Indohyus has a little bone in its ear, a little structure in its inner ear called the involucrum. Now, Indohyus is just a little hoofed land mammal. That's it. And it's the only hoofed land mammal that we know of that has an involucrum. Coincidentally, in the same place that Indohyus lives, if you go forward in geologic time, you will start to see the emergence of more aquatic artiodactyl animals, things like Ambulocetus, Pachycetus, and eventually you end up with cetaceans, that is to say whales. So why is this important? Because Indohyus is a land animal and it has an involucrum, and all living cetaceans have involucrums and no land animals do today. Interestingly enough, all living whales today also have what's called a astragalus, a double-spooled knee, or ankle rather, which is a structure that is exclusive to artiodactyls or even-toed ungulates today, like for instance, deer. Paleontologic change is also recapitulated in development, which is very interesting. We have tracked the evolution of the inner ear bones, which animals they emerge in in the fossil record, which animals rather that they emerge in within the fossil record, and how they migrate about. And it turns out that if you look at the development of a marsupial called the rat kangaroo, you see this exact evolution that we've witnessed in the fossil record occurring in real time. And there's an MRI, I think that's an MRI over there to the right, showing it, which is very cool. So there's like a little comparison. So evolutionary theory is remarkably robust. It impacts the modern world in a myriad of ways, from our agriculture to our medicine, and it has withstood decades upon decades of scrutiny. The only holdouts, at least in my opinion, seem to be those with a particular religious motivation, and even those are dwindling. So I am ready to talk about this. I have quite a bit to say, and thank you.
You got it. Thank you very much, Erika. And want to let you know, folks, couple of things. We are absolutely thrilled. If you have not heard, folks, at Modern Day Debate for the first time ever, we are absolutely thrilled that, as you can see at the bottom right of your screen, for the first time ever, we are launching our own debate conference called DebateCon. It is going to be in Dallas, Texas this January 15th. That's a Saturday, as well as the 16th. Two-day conference full of debates, so keep an eye out for that. We are absolutely thrilled, as we were talking to some really gifted debaters, very skilled, and so we're excited about that. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, as you don't want to miss that big event, as we're going to be live streaming during that conference for many of the debates. So with that, we are going to kick it into open conversation mode. Thank you so much, Erika, Jordan, Benjamin, and NephilimFree. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, who wants to get started? I have a brief thought I'd like to punt Benjamin's way, because I know he put a lot of work into the simulation that you were running in PowerPoint. But I think I saw some problems with it that I want to express, if that's all right. The first and the biggest is that you're not accounting for selection at all. Selection is the biggest, the most important player in evolution, right? It is it's called natural selection. It is what is actually honing the raw material of these mutations when they appear. And it can either speed up or slow down how fast something moves to.
That's the modern synthesis, right?
No. Darwin confirmed natural selection. Natural selection is just one of the four.
No, I didn't say natural selection. I said modern synthesis.
Yeah, I'm just talking about natural selection. I'm just saying you have to account for selection if you're going to run any kind of if you're trying to model how a mutation is going to move to fixation and how long it will take, or different issues with it, you have to account for selection. That's like the most important thing.
Well, I just pointed out that the modern synthesis failed, and evolutionists, biologists all agree on that.
Yeah,
so is that what you're positing?
I apologize. May I jump in since Erika asked?
Yeah, please take it over.
To me. So how in the selection, if we're taking that into consideration, how does it know what to select to get us from the bacteria to the human? How does it know what to do?
It doesn't. There's nothing directional at all about evolution.
Right. So then the word selection is kind of, it doesn't make any sense to say selection, because really it's up to chance. And so that's what I base my model on. If we're going off of raw chance with no mind and nothing intervening, if it's truly random.
No, it's not up to chance either. Just because there's no directionality to it doesn't mean that it's complete chaos, right? It's what's actually doing the selecting is the environment that the organism is in, right? So a great example of this is when you look at bacteria that becomes resistant to disease, right? To antibiotics. So if you have a disease, if you have an antibiotic resistant bacteria and you put it back into the original environment where there is no antibiotic present, it will actually be outcompeted by the regular bacteria that aren't resistant, right? So evolution is context specific, what is fit in one environment may not be fit in another one, which is why you have to include selection anytime you model any kind of mutation, because that's what's driving, how an organism is going to respond and change.
So I don't think that that's a proper parallel example, because that's still comparing two bacteria. And what I would need to see is a bacteria changing into whatever it is it's evolving into and then changing back. And I know that we get into some time frame issues with that, but the reason I bring that up is because from a creationist standpoint, if the bacteria is already there, God designed it a certain way, then there's nothing wrong with saying that the bacteria is able to change to do this, and then it can be outcompeted by the other ones because it's already there. What I'm questioning is, how did it get to that?
All I was trying to explain with the example with the bacteria is that you didn't include selection in your simulation, that you have to include selection. You also had a constant mutation rate, which mutation rates aren't constant, and you used modern bacteria conditions. I'm just looking at my notes over here. You used modern bacteria conditions, which is also not particularly apt. The prebiotic world is incredibly different in numerous different ways, at least from what we can glean from things like stable isotopes, things like that, to glean what this environment actually looked like, and things like the temperature and the oxygen content and in the atmosphere and things of this nature. So I wish it were that simple. Like, it would be really nice if you could just like run a simulation like that. And I do mean that sincerely. It would make everybody's job a lot easier. But life is simply too complex. Whether you're starting at the beginning when it's at its most simple, or dialing it up to 11 and doing it with extant organisms. But you have to account for selections, is my point.
Yeah. Well, if we want to move on, we can. But again, that word selection seems deceiving, because by selection, we have to leave it up to chance. And that's what I base that off of. Because again, what is deciding how it selects? If we've already got an existing bacteria that can adapt and unadapt, and I'm not saying adapt in place of evolution, well, that's fine. That doesn't contradict anything. What I'm saying is, how does it know to evolve into something else? And then how would it know to devolve into something else?
Can I try as like the layman's perspective? Maybe the idiot's perspective will help. So the thing you have to remember with evolution is that there's not a dichotomy between someone choosing something, intentionality, and randomness. Those two things are not an either or a Boolean. Okay, so you can have something that is not random, but is not intelligently directed. For example, imagine we lived in a world where 5 meters above, or that's what's 1.5 meters above the ground, there was a poison gas that would immediately kill anyone who touched it. Anyone who evolved, who mutated in such a way that they grew to a height of 1.51 meters would die. And that gene would never be passed on. There would be
what scientific example?
Please don't interrupt me. Please don't interrupt me. You can talk when I'm done. So anyone who touched that gas would die, and therefore that gene would never get into the population. There's no intelligence involved, but it would be selected for, if that makes sense. I hope that clears it up.
Well, so for me, that seems to pose another big issue, because there is intelligence evolved. The intelligence is already in, if we're talking about a human, the human who is changing in size, the intelligence is in their DNA. So my question isn't, and that would seem more like a morphological change to me. If we're just talking about a human, one's taller and so it dies. And so through natural selection, you can have morphological changes. My question is, how did we get from the bacteria by chance to the human based on the numbers that I gave?
Well, you keep saying by chance. It's not by chance. So there's a random element. So mutations are happening, and that has an element of randomness. And then which mutations survive is non-random. The environment will decide being just a convenient way of language to say it, there's no intelligence, but the environment will dictate who survives, because some creatures will be better able to compete and get resources and pass on their genes. There's no intelligence involved. It's a brutal world out there. And if there was unlimited resources, natural selection wouldn't work. But because we live in a world with limited resources, it does.
Suppose you'd use like here's a super simple answer. I'm sorry, Neff. Can I say one thing and then you can go? I'll be really quick. Okay. Yeah, so let's say I go out onto the beach and I build 2 houses, right? I build a house out of straw and a house out of stone, and then I leave, right? And a hurricane hits. The house that's made out of straw is going to be blown over, right? The house made out of stone is less likely to be blown over. Right. Now, we're just using inanimate objects. We're not even appealing to anything like that involves inheritance or organisms and how they reproduce. We're just solely talking about how the environment impacts a thing. In this case, that thing is the house, right? So is the environment or is the storm intelligent because it's selecting against the straw house? It's just doing what it does. It's just
so what we're hearing is a lot of philosophical ideas, and you'll see that their examples are based on ideas, and they want you to see this, and it's like a card trick. See this I'm talking about something not biological, therefore it happens biological. See
we already tried the biological
instead of biological examples, they're telling you their stories and their philosophy, because evolution is not science, it's philosophy.
Yes,
now, when it comes to
excuse me, didn't work.
So when it comes to the citrate,
biology.
Excuse me, you want me to not talk over you?
That's true.
So when it comes to things like citrate utilization, the evolutionists, this is the only argument they really have for evolution. If evolution were true, evolution had to produce cooperative mutations, had to build the information that builds physiological novelties in the body plans of living things, else the land-dwelling creature never rises from the fish. The bird never rises from the land-dwelling creature, and etc. Okay, evolutionists never offer arguments about that because they can't. And all you guys are repeating is neo-Darwinianism. That failed.
Neff, you've been going on for a hot minute.
Evolutionist biologists agree that neo-Darwinianism has failed, and that's why they offer what they call the third way, which includes ideas like phenotypic plasticity and synergetic epistasis and whatnot. When it comes to citrate, for example, you offer this kind of idea as evidence of evolution, but the truth is, what's been discovered is that the bacteria already have the ability to produce the citrate utilization. The gene is simply turned off. A mutation, a change, not necessarily a random one, but an inbuilt change based on the coding of the information in the bacteria.
Neff, I gotta
turns on a gene.
You're going all over.
Excuse me.
You've been going for a hot minute.
Excuse me. Turns on the gene.
It's me. So if you can both give me a second. Just there are a number of points that you made, Neff. So we do want to wrap it up right here. Might be a good upper. All right, NephilimFree has left. So we are going to just readjust the screen here. What we are going to do as well is remind you folks a couple of things. One, as mentioned, we are absolutely thrilled for DebateCon coming up in the future. So subscribe for that, as I'm going to flip on that subscribers only chat in just a moment in case you didn't get that quick reminder at the start, letting you know to subscribe, as we have some really epic debates being lined up for this conference that's going to be in person in Dallas, Texas in January. Also, want to let you know all of our guests are linked in the description. We really do appreciate our guests, even when they leave. So we do want to say, even Neff is linked down there. And I have a feeling he'll be streaming soon because he's probably angry. But we nonetheless, we do love all of our guests. And we do want to let you know, as always, folks, we really do appreciate you, no matter what walk of life you are from, whether you be Christian, atheist, you name it. We are really glad to have you here, as we are a neutral platform trying to give everybody their chance to make their case on a level playing field. And actually, maybe you didn't even notice. You maybe thought, wait, Neff didn't leave. He's still there in the corner, and he's been standing incredibly still this whole time. That's actually not NephilimFree. That's a photo of him. All right, okay. All right, so let I just make one last adjustment and get Jordan back in here in terms of the pictures on screen. And we'll kick it right back into open discussion. So I think, Erika, you had a point you wanted to make, and then we'll kick it over to Ben just to be sure that he gets plenty of time to respond as well, given that he is outnumbered.
Yeah, I don't want Ben to feel like he's, it's a 2v1 here. I mean, I know that's not what he signed up for.
Wait, hold on. To be fair, just in case that wasn't an accident, Neff is trying to get back in. So if that was an accident, and if he just accidentally clicked the button or something, I do want to give him a chance.
Yeah, no, I mean, could have been an accident for sure.
Bullet dodged.
NephilimFree.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing.
No,
I'll never again debate.
I'm just gonna say, I don't think. Okay, so if you left, We're not letting you, if you purposely left, we're not letting you back in because I'm tired of people rage quitting. We've had it happen like 4 times in the last month, and we need more out of people than them cutting out. And so I've got to tell you, Neff, if you left on purpose, I'm not going to hear you now give a mouthful to why I'm unfair or whatever else. Did you leave on purpose, Neff? I'm asking you to unmute. I'm giving you a fair shot. Oh, okay. Well, there he goes. So what we are going to do is
Bullets back.
click into open dialogue. I have a feeling he left on purpose because he just left again. So
since I'm not familiar with you, is it Ben? Do you want us to call us Ben or Benjamin? Which you
Doesn't matter to me.
All right, Ben. So what exactly, because you said during your opening that you don't think that evolution is necessarily in its entirety impossible or unreasonable. So I'm curious if you could describe real quick, like, what is your position with regards to evolution?
Well, I'm pretty open about the fact that from a nuanced standpoint, I'm a layman. As far as evolution goes, I don't have any background in it. But just in the general conversation we were having earlier, there's little things that I pick up on that seem logically inconsistent or seem to be either unreasonable or a contradiction, or some things are just a mystery. So I cannot say I won't ever hold this position, but right now I don't hold the position that evolution in its whole theory is impossible. But from some things I see, such as what we've been talking about, I think there are some aspects that are very unreasonable.
Would you take the position then maybe that, like, are you more of the school that there's an intelligent agent who is guiding it to its current position to all of life? Or are you more of like the de novo out of nothing creationist? Or like, how would you characterize your position, if you don't mind me asking?
No, that's fine. I'm here to answer questions. I'm a young Earth creationist, so it would be out of nothing.
Yeah. Sure.
Now, that being said, I don't think we can just throw out the baby with the bathwater with every concept of evolution because we can watch certain things happen. The gray area for me and my line is a squiggly line, so I can't give you a clear line, mostly because, again, I'm not studied in evolution. I don't know the nuances. But my line, again, goes back to the logic and the reason of what's being presented to me and what are some issues that we point out, such as, and I actually wrote one down I'd like to go back to Jordan on, but there's just some issues that make the whole picture of what's being claimed in the evolutionary theory just unattainable, just from how the world is. And there seems to be a lot of assumptions pushed into evolution. And sometimes assumptions are necessary to actually flesh out a theory. But assumptions are something that I struggle with. So I try my best to really finesse out the details if possible.
Okay. So I used to be a young Earth creationist. So you're not like, I empathize with your position. And I did want to say that I totally agree that accepting evolution does not necessarily mean you have to reject God. There are tons of Christians who accept both. So I agree with you there. I can hit the assumption thing, but you said there was something you wanted to kick over to me.
Yeah.
Since you're alone, I want to give you as much agency as possible.
Thanks. I'm going to need it. Let's see. This is actually going back to kind of the original point we were talking about. Before Neth and Erika were talking, you had given me the analogy of that based on the environmental conditions and how those affect a certain thing, that's what decides through natural selection what progresses and what doesn't. But what I am saying in the model that I built, and it's not a perfect model, but in the model that I built, is for the thing that the environment is going to weed out to even have happened, is that unlikely? So for the environment to have something to weed out, is that unreasonable? So I'm not arguing that once it's there, it can be weeded out. Is it feasible for it to get there within reason?
Okay. So thanks for clarifying that. All right. So selection still plays a role even in that sort of thing, because what your model is basically testing is if we started from nothing and had to leap to a certain point, could we do it with random mutation? And I totally agree. There's no way that we're going to go from literally nothing to a sequence of 80 amino acids in one go. Like that's not going to happen, right? Or at least, well, I don't think it is. Maybe Dan will tell me I'm wrong, but that seems unlikely to me too. But we don't do that. There's no single leap. It's a bunch of little leaps building off of each other. And so you don't need to go from 0 to 80 in one jump. You can go from 0 to 2 and 0 to 3, and then from 3 to 5, and then 5 to 8. You can build over time to these larger structures. So that's why we don't see, like in the fossil record or whatever, we don't see nothing humans. Like that's what we would expect if it was just out of nothing created, right? But that's not what we see. What we see is nothing, then a little thing, some simple things building up to more and more complex things. So it seems to me, given what we observe, we're going from simple structures to more complex structures over geological time. That seems to fit the model that we're proposing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, same with geology. I guess that falls into geology. The geologic column and how everything falls into that. I'm not going to go down a Noah's flood, try and rationale for that. Maybe that's the case. But again, I'm a layman on that as well. But again, if we're talking about, and I know that Neff's touched on this in a lot of his debates as well, so I'm going to go down the trail too. If we're talking about morphological changes, we see that. We can easily see that. And so this is, again, me being possibly a bit too strict, but that's the position I'm holding because I'm right now trying to tease out all the nuance. We don't see any substantial beneficial anatomic changes that are actually progressing something from one thing to another thing.
So
live.
Yeah, I think that tends to be a bit of a misconception, right? Like a thing doesn't become a new thing, right? It changes in accordance with the environment that it's in. And that means the existing structures that are already present are what's actually subject to that change. It's pretty rare that you're going to all of a sudden out of the blue de novo get a brand new structure, right? That's not to say that it can't happen. The example that I used in my presentation with the de novo protein, that's an antifreeze protein for these ice fish that live in these colder environments, right? Having that mutation that allows their blood to keep from freezing opened up a brand new area for them to basically exploit. They could go farther north without worrying about dying, right, in these colder conditions, and exploit the resources that were there. So that's huge for the fitness of these guys as far as reproduction and passing that gene then on to their descendants, right? But like you're not going to get, as Jordan said, it's not going to be nothing human, or you're going to have, ambiguous ape creature human. Right, there are all of these intermediary steps that occur, in the midst of this grand transition, if you will, and it's that gradient of change that we kind of refer to when we're talking about evolution. And when we see it in the fossil record, it seems much more drastic than it is today because we're getting pieces of the pie every million years, or 3 million years, or 5 million years, whereas today we see organisms every day, every hour, every minute. And so we don't tend to see this nice truncated, easy way of clocking how these organisms are changing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I think the trouble that I have with all of this, again, is it's the chain of evolution. So even if we're going from one organism to another, I'm not actually sure that would make things simpler, because every new, I don't think it's called morphology, every new species, every new creature would be another bottleneck where we'd have to explain how it got a little bit further. And so we can see creature A and creature B, they look similar. And again, I know that this is a redundant thing people try to take too far, but then it's like, well, show us the 50 in between those. But again, we don't have the 50 between those, so we can make an assumption. I'm certainly not saying it's impossible that that's what's happened, but again, because we're going off of an assumption, off of what we can see, it does still seem unlikely. And I do think that the equation that I used, it was a very generous equation, especially because I would imagine if you go that far back, you'd have a far lower amount of bacteria, and I think I saw that the reproduction rate of bacteria is somewhere between like 3 and 15 minutes per bacteria. So I went with a higher reproduction rate. And I left out some really complex things. So that is just to say, regardless of the species that are in between, I'm just talking about whether it was through five different transitional things or 5,000 different transitional things, the odds of the DNA, the odds of the amino acids within whatever that is getting from point A to point B through that means is still incredibly unlikely.
So another thing to remember when we're talking about these population genetics is it's not like we need to, the whole population is trying to do one thing and we need to wait until that thing is successful. Okay, we got that step. Now let's move on to the next step. It's a massive machine of parallel processing. So we're throwing, I don't know if you've ever done any Monte Carlo methods or maybe numerical methods. It's kind of like that, where we're just throwing mutation after mutation after mutation over this whole population. And so we're selecting simultaneously for all of these different new features all the time. So every new generation is selecting simultaneously for all of these features. So that's why it works. If they were trying to work together in series, it wouldn't work.
Well, I tried to account for that too, because like I said, the number of bacteria that I was accounting for reproducing perfectly each time was I think 5 decillion or 5 undecillion, which is an incredible amount of organisms. So even with that many reproducing every single time, I still couldn't get there.
Okay,
with the math.
Your model went sharply nonlinear, right? So it was a sharply nonlinear model, right? And that's because you were trying to do jumps from a very small number to a very large number. But if you broke it into smaller pieces, so like say we go from 0 to 5. 0 to 5 is beneficial. Boom, that's locked in. We don't need to do that ever again. It's already there. We've done it. And then we can go to the next 5. And once we do that, we don't ever need to do it again. We've done it. And so you wouldn't get into this massive exponential curve where you're going from 0 to 80 because you're never going to make that 0 to 80 jump. That's why it works. If you couldn't do that, if you couldn't build piece by piece, then evolution wouldn't work at all. The only reason it works is because you can go iteration by iteration.
Well, and to Jordan's point, to just add on to that, right? A lot of the structures that we have today, again, once you reach multicellularity and you get into organisms that are more complex, this gets a lot easier because you've got all of the basic building blocks already in place. And then it just becomes, almost trivial to get digits from a fin, right? It's basically just Hox playing around with Hox genes for a little while and expressing them for longer in different periods. But what Jordan said too is that, or what he kind of alluded to that's quite important, is the fact that, yes, once you have a step that's done, it's locked in. You don't have to do it anymore. And you also don't have to take it literally one step at a time. Some mutations, contrary to kind of, what our earlier guest was saying, they can work in conjunction with one another. Precursor mutations, for instance, right? Where one is on, right? You have a mutation present, and it doesn't really activate, quote unquote, to use like colloquial language, unless it's in the presence of another mutation, right? And then when they're both together, something really incredible happens, right? And you might get a brand new protein or something along those lines, right? So you can get, these little leaps and hops that occur. And then once they're there, you're golden. You don't have to re-evolve it a second time. So I think, would you say that maybe your problem isn't so much with evolution and it's more with abiogenesis? It's more with getting life from non-life? That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from you.
Yeah, that takes me more to the impossibility more than unreasonable. I specifically wanted to avoid abiogenesis, which is why I tried to do the progression from bacteria to human.
And I have to say, I totally respect, most people won't make that distinction. So the fact that you did is super kudos. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I had a point, and then I derailed myself there with that. But going back to the Hox genes, again, where do we see that we can do that now? Because if we can't actually demonstrate that with anything really empirical, then it is an assumption based off of, sure, we're looking at the geologic column, we're looking at the fossil record, we're assuming that's what happened, that it went from fins to fingers just with a few changes. But if it's that easy, why can't we do it? Why can't we?
We've done it. Yeah, we've done it in the lab. We've done it with skates, so like rays and things like that, and we've played around with it with sharks as well. If you take the wing bud of a chicken and you duplicate it, the most distal or far away from the body, like phalange, like the wing bud, and you duplicate it, you get 2 wing buds in the adult chicken, right? It develops in 2 places because you just duplicate the patch of cells that's going to become the wing bud. You duplicate it once, and then you have 2 of them in the adult. And it's as simple as that to get digits, right? You just take the distal end of the limb and you get an accidental duplication, and now you've got 2 fingers.
Well, no, I meant I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. I thought we were going from a fin, 2 fingers, not just having multiple fingers, but going from.
It's completely analogous. The finger is just an extended expression of the distal end of the limb. So whether or not you're working with a little nub on some ancient Sarcopterygian fish, right, or you're playing around in the lab with skates and rays and sharks today, it's the same exact process. You're just extending the expression of a gene that will eventually lead in the termination of a fin, and you're duplicating it so 2 fins form instead of 1, and at the very tip instead of at the base. And it's as easy as that.
Well, so that gets you to 2 fins, but the question would be, how would you get from the fins to the fingers?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's at the distal end. So it would be like if I was growing.
Oh, I understand.
You see what I mean? Yeah.
The trouble that I have with that is, once we get that to happen, now we have to incorporate the fact that the nervous system has to go with it, the muscular system has to go with it, because the fin is a completely separate system entirely structurally, other than you can see the comparison between the bones, but it doesn't have any of the same muscles and tendons and whatnot that our fingers do.
Yes, but the issue with that is that the early digits that we see in the likes of Tiktaalik or Pandorhexes are incredibly rudimentary, right? They're not the multi segmented fingers that we see in later mammals, or even early tetrapods. They're very, very rudimentary, and all they serve to do is effectively to spread out the surface area on the ends of the limbs for ease in getting around. It's a locomotion thing.
Again, you don't go straight from fins to fingers in one jump. You'll get the fin if it was like this, right? And then you have 2 bones, but that's all they are, and then eventually over a very long period of time and many incremental changes, then you start getting the more complicated structures that we have.
And we've done this in the lab. Is the coolest part of all.
Just to be sure there's not like a rapid between
I'm
Reason
sorry.
and Erika.
Yeah,
Just sure, Benjamin, if you had anything.
No, actually, I lost my train of thought on that. I'm trying to think. No, I don't know where I was going. Sorry about that. I lost where I even was.
No, golly, you're mad props, honestly, for like just having a chat with us. I mean, it's kind of fun.
So you mentioned earlier assumptions, and you were talking about some of the assumptions that you felt were unreasonable that went into evolution. Would you want to elucidate what some of those assumptions are, and maybe we can tackle some of those?
Oh, actually, that reminds me, one of the things I was just thinking about excellent teamwork. You mentioned that we saw that the structures got in place so that way they could just spread out their hand just for a support structure. But is that something that we can actually see take place today, or are we saying we see that in the geologic column, so we're assuming that it's transitional from one to another?
Well, it's more along the lines of is there a benefit to the increased surface area when it comes to locomotion in things like lungfish or other Sarcopterygian fish? And when we look today at these animals, when they're born and they lack that ability to kind of splay out the distal ends of their limbs, they don't move around as quickly. They're sluggish. They're anemic in how they move around. So there is definitively a benefit to having them, right? So if you take that back into the past, what do we see? Well, we see organisms that lack the sophistication of those digits. And then the second they appear, they proliferate and they show up in pretty much everything that can glean that mutation, right?
Well, we've established that any genuinely beneficial structure, it can't just appear. So that's my question. When we see it just appear, what are we filling in from it not being there to it being there? How are we getting to that?
like mechanically or in the fossil record?
Well, just how we're determining that it took place via evolution and not those were two different designed entities.
Well, there's a couple pieces. First of all, you look down in the geologic column, you're looking through time, right? The lower layers are older than the younger layers. So, hey, Kat. So, so unless the deity was like saying, okay, we're going to have the one-fingered fish now, and then I'm going to wait 100 million years, and now we're going to have two-fingered fish. Like, unless he's like waving his wand over and over again, then like that's just kind of how it would happen, if that makes sense. So unless you're like having sequential special creation, I guess that would explain it. But otherwise, like, I don't know how you'd get from like the fact that we're looking through time with this record and couple that with special creation.
Well, I think the common design thing is really an interesting question. And where I've kind of gotten with it, at least as for me personally, is that I find that most creationists will say, okay, I do think that like dogs and wolves are related. Would you feel comfortable saying that dogs and wolves are related?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So dogs and wolves are related, right? How do we know that dogs and wolves are related?
I don't know based off of the science of it. So I can't give you a 100% answer. I do know that the painted dog, right, is actually a different species of dog. It actually can't interbreed with the other dog. So see, that one's a hard one because it just looks like any of the other dogs. So looks very similar. So I would just say, if they're on a random lineup, well, yeah, you can probably mate all those because they all look the same. But then you figure out that it can't breed. So how does that work? I think the trouble is I don't necessarily think that evolution, given the concerns that I have with the whole picture, again, there's little things where if they're by themselves, such as possibly that, I wouldn't be terribly opposed to it. But in the whole picture, I don't think that evolution is necessarily a better option than creationism. It could be how God decided to do it, but I don't actually think that in a case like that, it makes more sense than he built one way, he built one another way, and they can't interbreed.
Yeah, I think so. The area that I was kind of going with that is that it seems intuitive that dogs and wolves are related. And of course they are. We know that they are. And the way that we do that is really similar to how a paternity test works. So like paternity tests, we take a highly variable segment of the DNA of the genome of the human genome and we compare it between people. And if it's highly variable, then it's very likely that between two unrelated individuals, it's going to be different. And between two related individuals, it's more likely to be the same, which is how we determine paternity. So it's genomic similarity. Take the genome, set them side by side. How similar are they? That helps us tell how close they are, at least with regard to their family tree, things like that. And within species, it works the exact same way. Except instead of using one region, we tend to try to use as much of it as we can, whole genomes in some senses, right? So we'll take the entire genome and we'll say, all right, how similar are these two genomes between these two organisms? And then using that, we can start to fill in the blanks on how closely related things are. So dogs are more closely related to wolves than they are to like coyotes, right? Using this method. And the thing about this method that, at least in my opinion, makes it problematic for creationists is because creationists will get on board with that. Usually they'll get on board with that concept. And then I say, okay, where does it stop? Where does it stop? Where does genome similarity stop equaling relation and inheritance? And it starts, being truncated up into these created kinds. Because most creationists will say, yeah, I'm cool with dogs and wolves being related, or I'm cool with lions and tigers being related. But lions and tigers are like 95% similar in coding base pairs, and humans and chimps are 98.8% similar in coding base pairs. So I'm looking for a standardization from the creationist side where they say, here's why we're drawing the line here. Here's an empirical way to do it. And evolution, when, because you just said you think that they could both be reasonable explanations for something. And to me, creation fails there. And evolution acts as an explanation for why is it that we see this convergence into the past of relationships between the genomes of organisms. Does that make sense? Sorry, I rambled there for a minute.
No, that's great. No, I get that point. As far as why we see the convergence and the similarities, and I think I'm going to have to make my way back after I say this. I think I'm going to have to make my way back to actually DNA tracing. But you can see the similarities because you have a common designer. Well, then there's going to be commonalities between everything to a certain degree, and then there's going to within the DNA makeup because he's using the same DNA to make whatever it is he's making. So let's go with that as if he built the base dog that now we've got all of our domesticated dogs from, and the base feline or cat, whatever gave us that. If he made the base one of those, that's where I'm saying I don't think that the parts of evolution that we can observe and trace, like we can observe and trace a dachshund changing, like all the domesticated dogs have been created within lifetimes of humans. So those are things that we can observe, but the trouble is jumping from one structure to another structure. And I'm sure that the argument has been presented to you, the idea of loss versus gain. For example, I don't necessarily have an issue with anatomical losses because everything decays. In fact, if the world I come at this from a presuppositionalist Christian worldview, which means that I'm looking at this through the grid of what we know about God. What we know about him through revelation in nature is, half unknown and maybe half known. Who knows what we don't know, because he wants us to explore it and enjoy it. And what he's given us as scripture is black and white in some areas, gray in other areas. And so that is, what was I saying just before I said that?
You were talking about common design, like similarities, meaning a similar designer.
Yeah. I am very, very tired. I've been up since about 4 a.m. So I'm pretty sure my brain just pooped out whatever it is I was saying.
Totally cool. So I wanted to hit, because I'm an engineer, right? So designing things is what I do. Well, part of what I would like to do anyway. So the common design leads to a common designer. The common pieces, like the genetic thing, is a common refrain from creationists. And it seems very intuitive, right? If things look similar, maybe it's because they were designed by the same person. But when if you were looking at it like God looked at all of things, right, and then designed them all, you would expect some similarities. But when you're actually designing things, you don't come to every problem fresh, and you can take solutions from things you've done elsewhere and apply them to the problem at hand. So, for example, I talked about the whales. Whales have a problem because they need to breathe air, but they have to go to the surface to do it. If God was just designing a whale, it doesn't seem to make much sense not to use a structure that's already great for getting air underwater, a gill. There's no reason, there's nothing stopping this designer from taking an excellent solution that is completely unrelated to a whale and throwing it on the whale. And you can repeat that kind of logic all throughout the animal kingdom, or all the kingdoms. There's more than one. Colloquially, the animal kingdom. So if a designer was truly designing things, I would expect we'd see those sort of things. And then there's no reason that would map onto genetic similarity, because again, if he's designing from scratch, what does it matter if they're genetically similar? Who cares? Just use the genes you have to use. Why? I want to give you time to respond, so I'm not going to keep going.
Sure. What benefit would it be? So let's go with the assumption that if God is real, he made everything for his glory, right, to one degree or another. What benefit would it have been for him to have given whales gills?
Well, whales then wouldn't suffocate. So if the whale, when the whale gives birth to a calf, sometimes the calf doesn't make it to the surface and it just suffocates and dies. That's suffering that doesn't need to happen. If the whale had gills, that suffering would be prevented. It'd be less wasteful. It would indicate, if by better you mean more likely to procreate and live a productive life, it would be a better design. I don't have access to God's design notes, so it's possible, depending on how you define this God, there could be a designed reason. Maybe he just doesn't like whales, maybe it's like, screw whales, you want gills, too bad, like, I don't know, but it, at the very least, it narrows down what kind of design parameters God could have, right? And still produce the design we see.
Yeah, well, the reason that I asked that is because it seems like we've got the concept that God has unlimited resources. And so with that, he has creative license to do whatever he wants to do with his unlimited resources. So we can say, well, it doesn't make sense because of X, Y, and Z losses of animals and whatnot. It doesn't make sense to design them that way. And I don't actually know what the suffocation rate of whales is. I assume it's more than fish because fish can't suffocate. But that being said, and this is where this is kind of converging with theology, which I don't mind that, but I don't know how far we want to go into the topic because it's on evolution. It's relevant, but death, is introduced through sin. So you don't have the whales dying and suffocating were it not for sin. And so same thing with diseases, same thing with all of that. That's natural sin. So again, from a creationist standpoint, the whales shouldn't be dying and suffocating anyway. If God designed them to be that way and not die, well, then he just designed them that way to do it. And now that sin's been introduced, every creature, every mammal on earth has the ability to starve to death. So we could argue that is a poor design because, it'd be silly to say, why can't every mammal do photosynthesis? That way it never starves to death. But that's just a kind of a parallel thing that I was trying to draw there between the design of the whale and another thing that could be seen as bad to us, but it may just be how God wanted to design it.
So how about something, though, with regard to the whales, though, that isn't perhaps brought on, like that wouldn't fit in, at least in my opinion, from what I understand of the theology, into that death brings sin and suffering, and therefore maybe that's the reason why they don't have gills. How about in whale development, cetaceans, like all this is actually just, so I said cetaceans because it's dolphins and whales, but very early on in their development, when they're still very small, for about 2 weeks, there's a period where they grow hind limbs. Their little tiny fetus grows these little hind limb buds in the back, and they stick around for a little bit, and then they're reabsorbed back into the body of the animal. And from the conventional science explanation of this, right, this is due to the fact that there was a time where these limb buds would initiate development, and eventually they would grow into these full limbs for an animal that was living on land or at least coastally. But over time, because it's metabolically costly to grow limbs when you're not using them, right, they've terminated the development of these limbs at like a couple weeks after they begin, right? And so then they stop and they're reabsorbed back into the organism. So this seems incredibly redundant and not at all, it's not detrimental to the fetus for it to actually grow these little hind limb buds, except maybe a little bit metabolically costly, but it's within the body of the mother. And, the mother is huge. So it's like she can fairly easily provide for these itty bitty little limb buds that it grows for just a brief period. But it doesn't really make a lot of sense that this would be a consequence of sin. So what is, and I'm going to share my screen if that's okay with James, because I think it's a nice little, a nice illustration so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. That I'm not just like making stuff up. Can you see this?
You know how much you love making stuff up.
Yeah, yes. True. So here's their little hind limb buds here, right? Yeah. During week 4 through 9, they grow them and then they're gone. At week 9, they disappear, never to appear again. And yet most cetaceans will still complete the development of a partial pelvis, right? So this creates a nice, interesting prediction for evolutionary theory, right? Because if this is the case, then there should be a period in time moving backwards where ancestors of modern whales still did have hind limbs, right? But they're shorter and stubbier and kind of useless. And that's what we see in Basilosaurus. That's what we see in this critter, Basilosaurus skeleton, where it's got these sad little itty bitty, wimpy little hang up legs, if you can see in the very, very back there.
Yeah.
Or there, for instance. And they're almost entirely internal, but there they are, fully developed. And so in this creature, obviously they continued to develop in the fetus's life and didn't terminate completely. But then in modern whales, they do. So how would you, in your opinion, like, how does that square? Why do dolphins and whales grow these little limb buds for a period, almost as if it's recapitulating evolution?
Well, the easy and probably not very satisfactory answer is that if that's how they were designed to develop, then that's how they were designed to develop. And I know that that's not satisfactory, so I'll try to go more into it in the sense that it seems almost more amazing to me and more in need of the idea of a mind or something acting in there. The fact that these legs start to develop and then are programmed to reverse and stop developing. How did it, again, through chance, how did it decide to do that in the womb? What in natural selection, how would natural selection have weeded it out so that the fetuses stop developing to a certain point in the womb? And then another point that I would make is I wouldn't necessarily say we must draw a line between the I'm just going to call it the older fish. What was the name of it with the small
Basilosaurus. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes. So again, I'm a layman with the terms and whatnot.
It's totally okay. Don't worry about it. That's me and anything that I don't wax poetic about.
That's another thing that I see as an assumption where sure it could be true, but it also could just be how it's created. And we're saying, well, because we see this in this fish or in this sea creature, and then we see that this fetus does this for this very short time, but it doesn't actually do that, they're probably related. They're probably descendants. They're probably however you draw that line. And I'm not convinced that has to be the case because again, what can we do? I'm forgetting the word for not morphologically, the other one. What's the word?
Anatomically? Is that the word?
Anatomically. What can we do now to see anatomical gain that's not just an addition of a finger, but anatomical gain that's actually the progressing and changing of a functional structure in a beneficial way? What can we do to see that now, as opposed to just making assumptions about what we see happening now in a fetus versus what we see as legs or rear fins on a prehistoric creature?
Okay, so two points. You talked about how would the fetus know to stop developing the legs, right?
Yeah.
And so again, there's no intelligence.
I do apologize, and I'm only cutting because I said how would chance and not how would the fetus, but that's what I meant. So I do apologize for cutting in. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Why would this mutation happen that led to this thing? And so in the womb, there are genetic expressions that determine how long your legs grow, whether they grow, X a little bit more, X a little bit less, right? And every generation, there's going to be some alteration. So maybe your limbs grow a tiny bit more than your parents' limbs are a tiny bit less. Cool with that so far?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
longer legs, shorter legs. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So every little bit of leg you grow costs energy. It's more difficult to grow, right? And so if on average, in a large population, growing, if you don't use the legs at all, not growing them will mean you have to use less calories, which means that you have more left over for, impressing the hot whale females, et cetera. You have extra calories, right? You have extra energy. You're more fit for your environment. And so not growing the legs gives you extra resources. And so on average, over a long time, people who grew less legs, shorter legs, or less developed legs had more calories. Now just keep doing that over and over and over again, and you get to the little itty bitty useless legs because they just stop growing them because there's no selection. It's the same reason why subterranean fish have eyes, but they don't work, and they're all like useless and barely functional, because putting all that stuff in there costs calories, and it didn't do anything for them. So they just, over time, there was some variation of better and worse. Worse cost less calories, and it had no penalty. So they just kept getting worse and worse, and that's how it works.
And we're not at the end.
Can I address what something Jordan just said? So for the cave fish, that's an example of a fish that lost its eyes. And so I guess my question for that would be, we're assuming that it had an anatomical loss, which again, I'm not necessarily opposed to because I believe that everything breaks down. And it randomly breaks down. The randomness is what causes the breakdown. So my question would be, if you put that fish back on the surface, is it going to get all that back? Because if the chance just takes it both ways equally, well, then it should get it all back. It shouldn't have any. Yeah, it could.
It might not.
And right. And so that's the only point that I'm making of there are a lot of assumptions built into the evolutionary theory that don't seem to me more reasonable than the creation model. And again, kind of with the I know we've already hashed up, but with the equation that I did, it seems fairly unreasonable with the timeline we have.
May I add, because I want to talk about the assumptions thing, if that's okay. I understand where you're coming. I think I understand. I hope I understand where you're coming from with that. But within science in general, regardless of what field we're looking at, and Jordan, you can correct me if I'm wrong for your area of expertise. So I'll just speak for what I know. But typically, assumptions that are made on processes are often deemed assumptions by folks who are kind of outside looking in, when in reality, what it is a process playing out that lacks a precedent to stop said process, right? So, for instance, radioactive decay will occur at a similar rate constantly if you go back in time for billions and billions and billions of years. Some folks might say, okay, that's an assumption. But the reason why this is proposed is because there is no known way to violate that assumption. The same is true for evolution and inheritance, right? So it's like, yet we see organisms changing in small ways and in large ways today. There is no reason to assume or to propose that this would be not the case if you were to go backwards in time. There is no precedent for that. It would be like saying gravity works until you go up 50 feet and then it stops working. And if I said that to Jordan would be like, well, what makes you say it stops working? Why 50 feet? And then I would have to provide a precedent for why the process ceases to behave in the way that we've only ever observed it behave at that point specifically. So does that make sense? Was that coherent, Jordan?
Yeah, basically like the uniform nature of physics, that they don't change arbitrarily.
So if we're going to extend that kind of to DNA and to structures and whatnot, that would take me back to morphological versus anatomical, because it kind of sounds like what you just explained supports the fact that we don't see the anatomical changes I've been describing. And so therefore, why would we assume they were happening if we don't see them? Whereas we do see morphological changes. So it'd be silly for someone to say, well, morphological changes never happen.
Okay, so let me ask a question. If you've got a huge variety of visual apparatus, I don't know, of structures that can detect photons, okay? And you've got some that they're just like flat panels, they just detect yes or no, and then you've got a fully formed eye. Would you agree that is an anatomical change?
Yeah, if things are being added to the eye, such as if one never had any concept of a lens, and then the new eye does have a concept of a lens, then that would seem to be anatomical to me. That being said, though, I'm answering as a layman, and I don't want to be one of those people who just says, "Oh, well, I don't want to walk into that question." I want to answer you genuinely based off what I know. So yeah, it seems like that would be an anatomical change.
I am the world's biggest layman when it comes to biology, and I respect someone who can admit what they don't know. Like, there's no shame in not knowing something. No one knows everything, right? There's no shame in that. That the only shame is when you pretend like you know and you aren't willing to learn. That's the only time there's any shame involved. So, okay. So if imagine you have this flat thing, right? And the edges are going to change a little bit over time, or like by random mutation, some are going to be a little bit higher, some are going to be a little lower, if it was slightly raised, then you can start detecting angles, right? You can start saying, instead of just light yes, no, you can start getting a little bit of directionality. You didn't have to change much, but you have that little bit of advantage, right? And now the creature who has that gets an advantage over everybody else, because everybody else can only detect yes or no, but this guy can detect where it's coming from, okay? And again, no intelligence had to be involved, just randomly, and now he'll be better fit for his environment, okay? The more it's curved, the more you can do that. Again, successfully tiny changes. Eventually, you get to the point, you could hypothetically get to the point where it's completely closed off. And now you have very similar to an eye socket, and all you had to do was curve up slowly over generations. Each step comes with a benefit, right? So it's selected for, and I'll start going faster now. So then you've got the thing, right? Well, if that fills up with fluid, which is a very simple thing to do, you're underwater. Well, now it's even better because it starts to like focus light. And so that's how you get these anatomical changes. It's small changes over and over and over again, with every step being beneficial. And just it's little changes add up over time. And what the creationist is doing is saying, okay, we can have these little changes and they can add up, but you can't go past here. And the question is, well, why? Why there? Why do you stop here? Why not here? Or why not there? Or why not there? You know, like what mechanism is stopping these small changes from becoming large changes?
So if I can keep running with that analogy, so once we get to the point with the cup and then the fluids in there, it would seem that there would be a point, right, that would come where the fluid will become trapped. And then that's going to start to build into the structure of the eye. Mm-hmm. Well, the trouble that I see with that is if that fluid now becomes trapped and it doesn't have any kind of a cleaning or recycling system for that fluid, well, that's going to cause all kinds of issues with hygienics and breakdown. So that's where I see from an anatomical standpoint, we're introducing one thing that if everything else is in place, sure, that could make sense, but we need a bunch of things to be happening at the same time for it to stay and for it to actually advance.
Yeah, potentially. And who knows, the myriad of different times that it's happened exactly like you said, right? Where a novel, beneficial structure has begun, you know, from our hindsight is 2020 perspective to form, and then something has gone awry and it becomes detrimental to the organism that's selected against, and then you're back to square one. That probably, I mean, we see that happen now all the time when organisms are, when organisms are born with rare, mutations, and they end up with, one too many, an extra horn or an extra antler. Deer, this happens to deer sometimes, and they get all sorts of little abnormalities. And because they don't create a benefit for the organism, they become culled from the population. They're selected against within nature. But sometimes these little changes are beneficial. And this is happening right now. I think it's it's in Alaska. I know it's in North America, but there's a population of wolves. They're called sea wolves, which I think is really cool. And they are slowly becoming more and more aquatic. They get something like 25% of their caloric intake from sea life, from marine animals. And if you look at the webbing between their paws, it's significantly more developed. It's thicker. They can splay their paws to a much greater degree than their landlocked cousins, right? And this gives them an enhanced ability to swim. They're better swimmers. I mean, everyone who lives in that local area can comment on that. So given that state of them now, if they continue unabetted, where's the line for you where they could not become more aquatic to the point that eventually you're looking at something along the lines of the evolution of whales, or something like the evolution of pinnipeds or something like that?
They wouldn't be a whale, just to be clear.
Yeah, they would. It would be something like that, though.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, how do we know that they're on this journey? And you might have a very clear answer, right? And then how do you know that the sea wolves weren't created that way and that's just how they repopulate? Look at the variety of birds that we have. How hard would it be to make a wolf that is able to be in water? Some birds will die if they land in water. Other birds can feed underwater. So we don't have wolves varying to that degree. But again, I don't know that for sure. I'm assuming that, but how do we know the creator didn't just make that wolf the sea wolf?
Because right now we know that this population of wolves is new to the area. People have been, living in North America for tens of thousands of years. Right? So these wolves haven't always been there. They're new. This is a new organism that is capitalizing on the fact that this area was unexploited by anything. You had a handful of wolves that were born and able to exploit the water in a way that other wolves couldn't. So they started capitalizing and exploiting on it and getting fat on seafood, while the other wolves, times were tough inland, and they couldn't make ends meet. And so eventually you get this population of wolves that all capitalize on this same resource, because wolves are, of course, very social animals. This has happened in since humans have effectively lived here on this continent. So we know that this has been a natural occurrence. So if nature can do it now, where's the line in your opinion? We know that God didn't specifically create these sea wolves, right? Because we've observed them come about.
Well, right. So I think that was my first question have 2 points to that. I think that was my first question of how do we know that they're new? What was the answer to that? How do we know that they're new and they haven't always been there and we just discovered that they were there? How do we know that?
I believe in this case, it's because there's nearby civilizations, right? And they've seen them slowly spend more and more time on the coast until they've eventually, and these are locals, they're not scientists. It wasn't until people who actually were like, hey, this is kind of weird. And they came down and started investigating the nature of these wolves that are spending most of their time on the coast. I mean, and it's not like they're living in the water. They're just getting significantly more of their diet from the water than their more inland cousins, right? So it's almost a transitional stage, right?
Yeah. Well, no, the only reason that I asked that is, again, it goes back to, well, who says it couldn't have been created that way? If in fact it is in that transitional state, that's the point where, or that's similar to, right, Darwin with the birds on the island, there was a difference in their beaks, right?
Sure.
Well, if you put that bird back in its native environment, it can also go back to having the beaks the way it was before. So same thing with the wolves. And the only reason that I'm kind of going back to the anthropomorphic, analogical, what was the A word
Anatomical?
Again? Anatomical. The only reason I'm going back to the anatomical changes is even with the webbing becoming greater, you could be weeding out that population of wolves the same way that you make the dachshund really short. It just so happens that because they can get all this food, that the ones with the more webbing are surviving, just like just like the birds with the more appropriate beaks are surviving. But that's just right. But that's just the change of what's already there. I'm not seeing new structures forming out of that.
Okay.
It's just changing what's already there.
So I'm super excited because you're like right there. So we're seeing changes what's already there. Evolution works on what's already there. And it changes what you already have and repurposes it for something else. And so you have changes to what already exists, and those changes are beneficial or not, and the beneficial ones make you more likely to survive. And eventually, over a very long time scale, those become a new thing. So if this wolf kept having wider splayed things, eventually, they'd be able to splay even wider. Like, you can just see how it would get to something new, if you just let it keep going.
The question that Jordan poses there is, how could we show that that is the case, right? The fossil record, we look back in time and we say, has this ever happened before? Has it ever been that we've seen this massive change in an environment that would have allowed an organism to benefit by capitalizing more on the coast? And that's what happened in the Fayum of Egypt during the Eocene, right? We see first no coastal animals, and then all of a sudden critters that start looking like they're exploiting the coast. How do we know that they're exploiting the coast? Because when we take the isotopes of their bones, we start to see that they're spending time in seawater. They're incorporating seawater into various metabolic processes that they have to undergo day to day. And lo and behold, eventually, it's aquatic. Go ahead, Jordan.
One thing that you've said it several times, so but we haven't really addressed it directly. You keep asking, well, couldn't the creator have just made it this way? And the answer to that will always be yes. An omnipotent creator could do whatever he wants, right? He could have made the entire universe last Tuesday and we'd have no way of knowing, okay? But you get to the point where that becomes an ontologically expensive model, and it's impossible to falsify. If you allow any evidence, no matter how complicated, to fit, well, God just did it that way. God just did it that way. God just did it that way. Then you've made it so that no matter what the evidence is, you can never possibly change your mind because you'll just incorporate it in your model. But that's ad hoc. It's kind of like if I said the government is tracking me. There's a secret government and they're tracking my every move. Well, if I want to, I can add any evidence into the secret government's tool bag if I want. They control the lights. They control the video. Like, I can do whatever I want. But is that a good model? It's not falsifiable. It's probably not a great model, right? I think you run into the same thing with this constant God touching the scales all the time,
I'm trying to think of, I definitely don't want to discredit the point that you're making. I guess I would say, sure, that's true, but just because that wouldn't be an exciting answer doesn't mean it's not true. And I'm sure that, you're okay with the fact that it doesn't make it not true. So I guess that's, again, I'm having trouble, again, seeing how the evolutionary model is more convincing than the creation model. And if I did want to go back to something that you said earlier, but I do want you to make this point first that you want to make.
Real quick. So the way we do that is by making predictions and then testing if they're true. Because if we have this model and we're going to say, okay, we don't know what we're finding, but we are predicting if our model is right, we will find this thing. And then if we do find this thing, it means either our model is correct or God just so happened to create things so it happened to look like our model, right? So a good example of that happening is Tiktaalik. They looked at I'm not going to go breeze through the details real quick, but we have a creature like this and a creature like this and we should have something with features in between. And if our model is true, it will occur in this kind of environment at this time. So let's go somewhere where we know that environment existed at this time and look, and lo and behold, there it was. It was exactly what they predicted. Now, if evolution wasn't true, why would it be there? Like, there's no reason for it to be there if evolution is false, unless God.
If your prediction is based off the fact that something built that way would be suitable for that environment, that could also support the creation theory because he creates something suitable for that environment.
So, but to that point, that goes back to the limb buds in the whales, right? I mean, that's completely detached from any kind of environmental requirement. The fact that the limbs appear and then they're reabsorbed, it's completely inconsequential. But under the lens of evolutionary theory, it fits like a puzzle piece, right? Whereas from the creationist standpoint, it's like, well, I guess God must have a purpose for it. I guess we just don't know what it is yet. So for me, and what Jordan was kind of alluding to there, I think, is that it boils down to explanatory power, things like predictions, right? And evolution, reaches those in spades, right? We're talking about massive gains in areas like paleontology. Finding Tiktaalik was a big one, but in addition, like evolution completely sculpts the way our medicine works and the way that our agriculture functions, right? I mean, we use the principles of natural selection to take wild mustard plants into the wide bounty of different types of organisms that we eat today, that we put on our table. So that's like taking it to the next level. That's taking these natural traits and just amping it up to 11 because they're beneficial to us. That's what nature does, but in the context of the environment in which the organism lives.
Well, the trouble with that, and I know that this is not well received, and I really don't want to go down this trail because it usually doesn't get a whole lot. It doesn't get very far in the argument. Is whatever we do to intervene and to mingle in controlled environments, such as I was listening to actually a debate the other day between I think it was Aaron Raw and Dr. Fuzz or whatever, but he was talking about how the fact that one of the troubles he has with the RNA sequencing or production or something is that in the testing they use not only distilled water but a certain type of UV light that's not found not found naturally. So the problem is when we start tinkering, we're kind of proving the concept that in order for this stuff to happen, it involves a mind. I don't want to just say so then everything's discredited because God gave us a mind to tinker. But that the problem is I can't help but see how that fits the creationist model. But the mind seems to be an unknown that's very hard for the evolutionary model. And I can't say that means they're never going to have an explanation for it, because I think we have to be really careful with our predictive powers. But right now, the mind itself is a really hard thing for the evolutionary. The mind, yeah. And consciousness.
Consciousness.
Well, and the ability to not the idea of existing, but the idea of knowing that you exist, kind of thing. Because obviously animals exist. Animals can eat. Animals can do things. You can train a monkey to push a button to get a pebble. You can teach monkeys sign language and whatnot. But the question would be, if monkeys are just in nature, would they find a need to teach themselves sign language? Well, at some point humans did. At some point humans realized there's a need for sign language. And so we're kind of out mentally. We're able to see outside of our present state of being and say, well, what does the future look like? What does the past look like? And how can we manipulate that? It seems that any animal does not have anywhere near the capacity that we do.
So I think that I've got an interesting take on this, because I would argue that almost everything, with one big glaring exception, almost everything that humans do is simply a gradient of behavior of something that other primates do. So chimpanzees have politics, they form coalitions, they mourn their dead, they laugh when they're tickled, they play pranks on each other. Campbell's monkeys have syntax and grammar that they use when they communicate with one another. Vervets will lie to get what they want. They'll make the call for, oh my God, there's a cheetah. And then when everyone leaves, they go down and seize the prize that everyone's trying to monopolize, the fruit or whatever. Chimpanzees will specifically warn their colleagues if you like put a plastic snake on the ground in front of the mountain Gombe, right? They've done this experiment where they'll put a snake on the ground, and chimpanzees will selectively warn members of their troop, but only the ones that they knew couldn't see the snake. They won't warn the ones that they know could see the snake in eye shot. They'll only warn the ones that couldn't see it, right? They're capable of having favorite tools and teaching their young to use the tools that they like to use. Different chimpanzee societies have completely arbitrary cultural rules for the tools that they use that they pass down to their offspring, right? So we don't have a monopoly on this idea of culture and this idea of warfare and this idea of altruism. And I mean, chimpanzees, they're the worst swimmers in the world, and yet we've got video footage in zoos of when a chimpanzee falls into their local moat. Some of them will risk their lives to try to save their fallen comrade, right? We've done tests with them for altruism, where they'll give them a blue and a green token, a blue and a red token. And they'll say, okay, if you give us the blue token, then you get 5 grapes. And if you give us the red token, then you get 2 grapes, but your buddy 1 cage over also gets 2 grapes. And they will overwhelmingly prefer to give the altruistic coin. They won't always, but more often than not, they'll give the coin that's going to get their buddy some grapes. The funny thing is, when you open up the screen in the back so the rest of the troop can see them, then all of a sudden they're really, really generous and altruistic, because everybody can see that they're making the selfish or the altruistic choice. So the idea that the mind is something that's exclusive to humans, I don't think we can show that to be the case. But that's just my primatology.
What was the monkey that warned about the cheetah?
Vervet monkeys? Yeah,
Marmot?
Vervet, V-E-R-V-E-T. Vervet.
You've made a terrible mistake by wandering into primatology.
Horrible mistake.
Well, see, the thing is, and I think that, so this is kind of my big powwow into the debate world. The problem with me is I'm not a great debater because I like to have conversations, and so it's like sometimes like, man, you're really supposed to be like fighting them. It's like, no, I kind of just want to learn. So I'm going to try to do that as well.
Galloped at you. That was not nice for me to do. I totally gish galloped at you there. That was not cool. Sorry.
So with the velvet monkeys, what were they actually called with the V, right?
Oh, V-E-R, vervet.
Vervet.
Yeah.
With the monkeys, we all know which ones they are.
With the vervet monkeys, my question is, did the chimps look at what the vervet monkeys do? And maybe they don't live in the same place, but did the chimps look at the vervet monkeys and say, that's a really good idea, I'm going to take that idea, and then they start doing the cheetah thing? Because a human would do that because we're outside of what we're just programmed to do. So that's my question.
Yeah. So vervets and chimps, they don't tend to live in the same areas. Vervets live in savannas, and chimpanzees tend to live in, more lush tropical rainforest. They live in like the Congo, Central Africa, West Africa, and vervets tend to live in like South Africa. But that being said, chimpanzees will observe if like one chimpanzee, there's this really funny example of proto-fashion is what they call it, but I think that's really generous. Where one chimpanzee female, for no reason, she took a piece of grass and stuck it behind her ear and just started walking around. And when it would fall out, she'd pick it back up and stick it back, always the same ear. And every day she would get up, find the piece of grass, the same piece of grass, and stick it in her ear. And within days, other chimpanzees, first it started with other females, they started saying, oh, that's kind of weird. They started picking up grass and putting it behind their ears. And then it was all younger females, right? Because they have a hierarchy. And then the older females would do it. And then some of the males started taking it up and doing the same thing, right? And this is like really weird, right? Because there's no benefit to sticking a piece of grass in your ear, right? They just did it because they felt like doing it, right? And there's no fitness benefit. It's just a cultural diffusion of a behavior.
Darn kids with their blades of grass.
Yeah, they're modern fashion, right? But they'll do it with tools too. So female chimps are smaller than males, and so they don't tend to go on the hunts as often. So what they do instead is that when male chimpanzees will go hunting, they'll take a stick and sharpen it with their teeth, their canine teeth, and they'll use it to skewer bush babies in areas where they can't reach with their fat hands, right?
Oh.
And they will teach that to other females, right? And I can't remember the specific study, but I believe they'll only teach it to females, which is interesting because it's basically saying, look, if you're a male, you don't need this skill, but if you're a female, you will.
That it's hard because that's to me that seems like different ways that animals are just kind of programmed to operate. And I don't want to discredit the grass blade thing because that's really weird.
It's like, why would, I don't know, it's funky. I don't have an answer for it either. So. But
with the chimps, like, sharpening the stick, if that's within their capability to do, then it wouldn't seem absurd that they would teach others to do that because, dogs teach their young how to hunt. Lions teach their young how to hunt. Birds push their baby birds out of the nest. So it doesn't seem unusual in that sense. There is a difference between what a chimp can carry out versus what a bird can carry out, but I'm seeing the same thing of this is how a chimp's designed to operate. This is how a bird's designed to operate. So in general, they're going to operate the way they operate. But humans, we have the ability to completely defy what any social norm is and completely do the opposite of how we think we're supposed to operate. And so we don't have to go too far down the consciousness path because I'm getting a bit, I don't want to say I'm getting a bit tired, but I'm not sure I can handle a full change into that. But it just seems like there's such a difference in our awareness of our ability to change from what's natural to us versus animals do what's natural to them, and that's just what's natural to them.
This may be
James's.
a good opportunity to jump into the Q&A if you guys are all ready.
Yep, let's do it.
This was really fun, and I want to say, you didn't have to stick around, Ben. You really didn't. You didn't have to stick around and have a chat with us, literally. I didn't think this felt like a debate. I thought this felt like a fun discussion, but
which I think is better anyway.
I really appreciated it. So, and I thought that you asked really good questions, and you seem like you are really giving a lot of thought to all this stuff. And so, awesome.
Yeah, I know that my co-interlocutor had his reasons for leaving, but I wasn't. I've heard everything he offers, so I was really expecting to kind of ride off of all the points that he made. So I do apologize. I didn't bring more points.
Totally.
I wanted to make a single punchy one, and that's what I had.
Right before we get to the Q&A, I just want to say that I'm a skeptic. That's central to my identity, and I super respect someone who can say they don't know something, because a lot of people are really uncomfortable admitting that for some reason. So gold star, that's what I like to see. I think if more people did that, we'd be better off as a society. And now we can answer people's questions.
And to be a bit pokey, I think some advocates of evolution need to be a little more open to riding on or to kind of owning the results of not knowing some things. And if you want to have confidence in something, that's fine. But there's things we don't know. And so I think we have to be careful before we say, well, this is how it works, because we don't actually know it works that way.
We know way less than we often think that we know. I think that the more you tend to dig into a subject, the best sign that you're on the right track as far as learning goes is when you sit back and you go, oh crap, I don't know anything about this. I thought I knew, it turns out I don't know anything. There's so much more here than I could have ever imagined. But that's, to be kind of a gigantic dork or whatever, that's the cool part about learning and about science and, about kind of opening your mind up to places that you aren't as well read in the first place.
Yeah. And I would extend that to philosophy and theology as well. I think that's an important principle for all of the realms that human intellect can plunge into.
I don't want to keep rambling. I know James wants to get to the Q&A.
We can jump into it right now. Want to say thanks so much for your questions, folks. We do appreciate it. And we're going to jump right into it to get through as many as humanly possible. Contrarian 420 says, does evolution exist for consciousness? If so, how?
That's a great question, and nobody knows the answer to the question of consciousness. It's an active area of research.
Yeah, I think an important thing to note, though, is that as far as consciousness goes, I think we can make an excellent case for the presence of different levels of consciousness in living organisms today, right? Like no one here would argue that like a clam is less conscious, quote unquote, than like a dog, right? The ability to have certain levels of cognition and respond to varying levels of more complicated stimulus. Like these are what we tend to do when we're gradating how conscious, quote unquote, an organism truly is. Now, as for how it evolved in the first place, I would propose there is a massive benefit to being able to know that you are a thing and that things are happening around you. So once it did arise, whatever it is, I would propose that would experience a massive selection.
You got it, and thank you very much for this question. Coming in from Mango T says, Ben, where do the essential building blocks of matter originate from? Are you aware of infinite regression and its fallacy?
Well, again, coming from my view, the building blocks that, if everything was created all at the same time, then it's all already in the thing that was created. And as far as to the second question, I don't think I'm familiar enough with that term to actually explain that. So
you got it. And this one from Mr. Monster says, first off, we would still have discovered this process of evolution even if Darwin was never born. Evolution is a real process you don't understand. I'm not sure if that was...
I think that's...
Do you?
That's mostly true. As far as me not understanding it, and it's probably also true that this theory certainly could have come about. But as much as I don't know, unfortunately, I see a lot of things that we actually don't know about evolution. And that's where the big the skepticism is for me. It's in the unknowns that we have a lot of confidence in.
This one from Mango T says, Ben, these organisms that have evolved into a human would mean these tiny organisms are collectively intelligent. Therefore, we are not in control.
Well, I don't think that's the case.
This one coming in from Josiah Hansen says, Talking Snake says, on today, Enshinmei. Thank you for that, Josiah. Native Atheist says, science deniers keep losing these. Let's see. We really, I do have to mention, folks, though we appreciate your super chat support, the more questions regarding the actual content, rather than calling people science deniers, it really can uplift the value of the Q&A if they're more sincere questions rather than calling people names. Black Panther, thanks for your question, says, if evolution were true, then how come Nephilim, let's see, okay, that's another personal attack. Mango T, thanks for your question, says, Erika, do you believe evolution is similar to Cinderella, given they are both let's see, fairy tales and should not be taken seriously? To be fair to both sides, again, we are looking for more serious questions because that is something that during the podcast, some people are like, they're like, yeah, we're used to like during the Q&A more sincere questions rather than calling things fairy tales or name calling. But if you want to respond to Erika, you can.
No, that's okay.
This one coming in from, appreciate your question, Mango T says, Ben, it's called natural selection, not selection. It's the natural surroundings that are indirecting organisms strong enough to evolve. I think.
Yeah, I get that, and I touched on that. I have no problem with the environment conditioning something that's already there. My problem is how it gets there to begin with. And again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but the math that I showed shows it's incredibly unlikely that it would actually happen through randomness, which. Again, I know we discussed it, but it's happening through randomness. It's chance.
Gotcha. And thanks for your question. Coming in from Experiments in Prebiotic Chemistry says, hey, Erika, I think you dropped the ball here. You forgot to ask, quote, what is the mechanism for supernatural causation? How does an immaterial mind do anything at all? I guess they're asking I'll give you a chance to defend yourself, Erika.
No, I mean, I understand where they're coming from. That's not usually my style of debate, though. I'm here to discuss evolution. And, as far as I'm concerned, as far as my opinions are concerned, if someone wants to take the stance that, God did something and they are taking that as a faith claim, that God just did it because they believe that that's what happened, that's outside of the purview of science, as far as I'm concerned. It's only when folks want to come in and say, science confirms, young earth creationism, or science confirms that evolution is bad, that I post up, I square up.
You got it. And Ben will give you a chance to respond to that, since it's a question in a way to you. What is the mechanism for supernatural causation? How does an immaterial mind do anything at all?
It's an immaterial mind, so it's a mind. So that's how it does things. It's just immaterial. And that's just to say that if God is completely outside of his creation, that's not a contradiction. That's just something we can't understand because we are the creation inside of it. So I don't think the second point takes anything away from the concept of God. I think it's a misunderstanding.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for your question. Discovering Ancient History says, just want to give a shout out to Erika. Great job. You have a fan out there.
Very kind.
Mr. Monster says, what is the third way? And Ann Rurvik says, Ben, there's a 1 trillion chance that I'll hit the fly on the wall from 10 feet away. Can I hit it on the first try? Probability problem solved?
I don't actually know if that's how the chances work. Again, you actually, because you have a mind and because you have the ability to tinker, you could do all the math and actually make your chances like a 50-50 shot. So that's my point. The chance issue is not a problem if you stick a mind in there to manipulate it. It's if the ball threw itself somehow and it completely randomly came to be, that's what I would argue against.
You got it. There's one coming in from Do Appreciate It. Decepticons Forever says it's truly mind blog. Let's see.
Like a minefield out there.
James, it's a start and stop show.
Yeah, I do want to encourage you folks. We are looking for more sincere questions rather than just calling things fairy tales or just nonsense. That doesn't really add a ton in terms of like insight or deep thought into the Q&A. Let's see.
Oh.
I'm going to try to put
Can I ask a question real quick?
Well, I'm going to finish this one giving it the most charitable interpretation there, saying, Ben, let's see. Ben, how would you explain the supernatural? Like, what reason do you have to give for thinking it's real in terms of its explanatory role in reality?
How would I explain the supernatural? Well, the supernatural occurs through the supernatural being, who again would be God, which would go back to that mind question originally. He's outside of our realm, of his created realm. So he's able to fully intervene however he wants to because we're his creation. I don't know if that answers that the best. I wasn't particularly expecting that question, so I do apologize.
You got it. And then I think, did you say you had a question, Jordan?
No, I did. I actually wanted to ask Erika because I wanted to know this, but I couldn't get a definitive answer on. So for the great apes, there's humans, there's gorillas, there's chimps, there's orangutans.
Yes.
And then is there also bonobos, or are they a type of chimp?
Well, so the thing is, they're their own species. So they're pan-paniscus, and then chimpanzees are pan-troglodytes, and then there's subspecies of common chimpanzees. So generally speaking, we'll say chimps and bonobos because they're both a member of that same genus. They share pan. So as far as like, it depends on if you're asking how many species, right, or how many genera of apes are there.
Okay, so how many great apes are there? 5 or 4, I guess is my question.
I think bonobos deserve their own thing. I think they're genetically distinct enough, and I think that they are certainly behaviorally distinct enough. So I would say 5. I would say bonobos, chimps, humans, gorillas, and orangutans.
That's a side note that in my preparation for this, I couldn't get a clear answer in my mind. Sorry, James, that was really bugging me. So
No problem.
No problemo. Joshua Ellick, thanks for your question, says, Benjamin, a common YEC objection is, quote, no fish has ever evolved into a non-fish. Evolution responds, quote, individuals don't evolve, populations do, unquote. What are the strengths and weaknesses of that response, Benjamin?
Well, I think it's a good theory. I guess I'd want to see, again, anatomic changes in a population today that are structural, that fully function, that are beneficial. If we want to go off the geologic column and the fossil record, again, that's where I see the assumptions being plugged in. So I think I'll leave it there.
Gotcha. And Pivot Cyroy says, after the last couple of dumpster fires, glad to finally see some decent moderating. Compliments are due when they are due. Thanks for your kind words. Appreciate your compliments. Although I have to say at the same time, we believe giving the speakers a lot of freedom such that when tonight it goes peacefully and it's more calm of a conversation and it's not a dumpster fire, absolutely great. It's organic. That's the way we like it. Sometimes it's going to be organic and it's going to be fiery. This ain't your grandma's debate channel. It's just the way it's going to be, so I don't have any apologies. Experiments in Prebiotic Chemistry says that should be the slogan for YouTube, your YouTube channel, Erika. Quote, I'm not just making stuff up, unquote.
It's got to have like two cartoon hands, like, I swear I'm not just making this up.
And you got it. Fred and Six Fly says, I'm here for the lecture in biology by Erika. Go, Erika, go. You have a fan out there.
That's very kind. Yeah, again, Jordan's right. You really have to be careful when you bring up the primate stuff around me. I try not to bring it up myself because I know my triggers. So, but it does happen.
You got it. Thank you very much for your question. This one coming in from Kent Woods says, quote, we live in a holographic fractal Mandelbrot projected by collective consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, unquote. That's from Vinnie Eastwood. Thank you all.
Cool.
And thank you very much. Sunflower says, Erika, do primates commit suicide? As in, have they been observed to take actions that they knew would directly result in their immediate death?
I don't know. I know they engage in risk, like highly risk averse or high risk behavior, I suppose I would say. And I believe they do so when cortisol levels are high. So they do it at higher rates when they're like depressed, I guess you would say. I'm putting it in quotation marks to avoid anthropomorphizing. But as far as suicide goes, I don't know. I've not really looked into it. It wouldn't surprise me though if primates that are kept in deplorable conditions, animals in general are known to do this, where they'll just stop eating, because they're being kept in like a concrete cell where it's like there's nothing for them to do. They just get depressed and they kind of give up. But whether or not you could call that suicide in the same sense that we refer to human that in humans, I believe in humans, I don't know.
You got it. And thank you very much for this question. Want to remind you folks, our guests are linked in the description. We've got some more questions, but I do want to just give a quick reminder of that, as we really do appreciate our guests. And if you want to hear more from them, it doesn't have to end here. You can find Erika's, Jordan's, and Benjamin's, and Nephilim. Oh, that's right. Not yet Benjamin's, but if he gets one in the future, we'll put it in there for him. And NephilimFree's links in the description. We do really encourage you, check those links out. And Topic Discuss says, I just want to know when Erika is going to let me interview her on my video podcast.
Shoot me an email. But these days my emails I get back slower. It's busy right now, man. It sucks. Being an adult is hard.
Amen to that. Zagros Ozcan says, damn, Erika, you are on absolute fire today.
That's very kind. I'm sure that came in at the exact moment that I started waxing poetically about primates. So
you got it. And Vandalia 1998 says, can't think of a good question since I was just able to get on, but wanted to cheer on Erika and Jordan. Also, Erika, poke, poke, poke.
Vandalia, I owe you an email.
Then Edward Redbeard, thanks for your question as well, says, question for Erika, how many generations to fixate a mutation in sexual species? How many mutations to subspeciate? Is the reason you never use exact numbers because you conclude the time frame does not fit?
No, the reason I don't use exact timeframes is because it's incredibly dependent on the environment and it's incredibly dependent on how beneficial the mutation actually is. Population genetics and how mutations move to fixation is so much more complicated than even I can wrap my head around, and I've taken soft courses on it. So I tend to not put numbers to it simply because as more information comes to light about whatever specific example we're talking about, there's always going to be room for tweaking, if that is appropriate, if that makes sense.
You got it. And also, thank you, Edward. Edward said, my question is My question is sincere, and I just realized this was the same question because I thought for sure it was going to end with, is the reason you never use exact numbers because you know evolution is a myth? And I was going to be like, that's like, folks, I know everybody's a rhetorician, but I'm just like, I appreciate your sincere question.
Can't eat rhetoric like that. You really just can't.
Mark Reed says, so thank you, Edward, for being sincere and that it wasn't that. Mark Reed says, I want to give full credit to Benjamin for flying solo and carrying his side alone. Always rough to take on multiple people alone, and he did great.
Well, I appreciate that, but my interlocutors were incredibly friendly, and I really enjoyed this. So thank you all.
Yeah, I enjoyed this too. This was super fun.
We only have 2 more. And topic discusses question for Erika. Erika, why do we depict Neanderthals as hairless? How do we know that versus having them having more body hair? Also, did their large occipital lobe make it easier for them to see at night? I have a lot more questions.
Ooh, those are some good questions. Yeah, so in the case of Neanderthals, that how hairy is the hominid is a really good question, but it tends to be applicable usually only from like earlier than Homo heidelbergensis, because with Homo neanderthalensis, Neanderthals, we have their genome. So we know about how hairy they are because we have access to the genes that control for hair growth all across their bodies. We also know that these guys were probably wearing a lot of clothes because they were living in Eurasia. So in addition, or in combination with having their genome, we also have a lot of support for a lot of their behavior to come to the conclusion that no, these guys were not covered with hair. Now, once you get into like Homo erectus and a little bit earlier, it becomes a lot more of a question. As far as the occipital bun goes, the occipital lobe, those massive honking occipital lobes that these guys were sporting, I believe based off of the endocast material that we have from them, that it didn't have to do with their visual acuity. And part of the reason I think we know this has to do with not just the endocast, but also the actual size of their orbits. They actually, if memory serves, they actually have smaller eyes than humans do. They're less neonatic than we are. So they would have been pretty poor at actually capturing light, although their ability to differentiate between colors during the day, like all other diurnal primates, would have been incredible, just like ours is. So.
You got it, and thank you very much for this question coming in from Tig Duan. Says, hi, Benjamin. I disagree with your position, but I really enjoyed your civility. I hope you do more debates.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
You have got a lot of endurance, Benjamin, as well. And in fact, all 3 of you, Erika and Jordan, because all 3 of you, I think, are on the East Coast, so we appreciate you staying up so late with us. And especially, again, Benjamin, thanks for hanging in there, as I know it can be mentally stimulating and exhausting as you're here by yourself. But want to say, folks, Erika, Jordan, and soon if Benjamin gets a link, but also Neph, all linked in the description. So if you want to hear more, you can click on those links below. Contrarian 420 with a last minute super chat says, tip for the house. Thanks for providing an unbiased platform for debate that is solely needed. Thanks so much, Contrarian. That really does mean a lot. We appreciate that. And so I'm going to be back in a moment to let you know about upcoming juicy debates that we are absolutely excited about, as well as some inside details about the upcoming conference, the first ever Modern Day Debates DebateCon in January in person in Dallas. I want to say thanks one more time, though, Erika, Jordan, and Benjamin. It's been a true pleasure to have you.
It was a blast to be here. Thank you.
Yeah,
It was
fantastic.
a pleasure. Thank you.
100%. The pleasure is all ours, and I'll be right back, folks, in just a moment. Amazing. Thank you, dear friends, for being with us. I am excited to be here and to finally get to talk. I love listening, don't get me wrong, but I also love getting to say hi to you in the old live chat. Want to say thanks for being with us. Bill Passado, thanks for dropping in. We are pumped that you are with us, as well as Ivan and Molasses. Glad you are with us. And Hax, good to see you again. Ray Rard, you've been here for a long time as well. Gay Nomadic as well. A lot of long timers, but also I love seeing the new people here and just getting to say hello and welcome. We are a neutral platform here at Modern Day Debate, hosting debates on science, religion, and politics in the most fair way we can. We really do want to welcome you from all walks of life, whether you be Christian, atheist, Muslim, agnostic, you name it. We really are glad you are here. We really do appreciate you spending time with us. It's always fun. It was a fun Friday night for me. I really did enjoy that. I like the peaceful ones as well. I know that the dumpster fires, anything can get old, right? So too many dumpster fires do get old. Too many peaceful conversations can get old. I enjoy the variety, and that's something I loved about tonight, is that we haven't had one like this for a long time. It was a very sincere conversation. I really didn't appreciate that. And I want to say hello, though. Sideshow Nav, good to see you, as well as Jared A. Thanks for being a member, Jared. We totally appreciate that. I don't think I've ever given enough credit and enough thanks to our members. For real, I'm sorry about that, members. It's just, I do want to say thank you for supporting the channel, for supporting the vision, as we all together share values that transcend. You could say that even though we might be Christians, we might be atheists, no matter what, everybody I think would agree that, hey, we want everybody to get a fair shot. Let's at least let it be a level playing field. That's something I think we really do agree on across different views. And so we do appreciate that, my dear friends. Thank you for your memberships. Thank you for your support and all the different ways that you give it, whether it be hitting that like button, or maybe it's sharing our content. As I do check in like the YouTube studio, and I sometimes see like, wow, our videos do get shared a lot. That actually, they show us that in the Creator Studio for the analytics. And so we do want to say thanks for doing that, as that helps us grow, as new people learn about us that way. And we really do appreciate all of your support just in being here. For real, it is a fun community when we have people from all walks of life. It's not the kind of bland, like, it's true. This is a channel that if you want to go somewhere, if you want to go to a stream where you basically are told all of your views are true and you're not challenged at all, and it instead just affirms you in your beliefs, that's not here. Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I am saying it's true. You are going to be challenged here by the speakers. You are going to be challenged by people in the audience. Not everybody's going to agree with you, is what I'm trying to say, and that's okay. We don't have to agree to be friends. That's why I say, whether you be Republican, Democrat, atheist, Christian, you name it, I really do want to let you know, sincerely, I really do want to give you a fair chance, extending the old olive branch and saying, hey, we do want to be friends with you. And so thanks for just being a part of Modern Day Debate with us, as this is a growing community and we're optimistic about the future. My friends, in fact, let me tell you about some of this based and or red-pilled epic stuff coming up. My dear friends, at the bottom right of your screen, tomorrow, audit the police. We are going to have a debate on whether or not it is a good thing that, I don't know if you've heard, sometimes they're called cop watchers, sometimes they're called First Amendment auditors, people who will record police or government buildings, for example, for the purpose, well, we'll let the speaker make her case, as tomorrow she'll be defending. Noli is joining us. It's going to be a brand new topic. That's something I'm excited about, as we are working on getting new topics all the time. We had a fun one in October. I think that was just before Halloween, and I can't believe it's already December. I'm like, whoa, there was a whole month between that debate, the ghost debate, whether or not there's evidence for ghosts. There's a whole month between that and where we are right now, as we're in December. Amazing. It's just been flowing by. I'm amazed. But anyway, that's one example of where we're like, hey, that'd be a fun topic. We've never done that, really. We've done Do Demons Exist, but we never did evidence for ghosts, where basically he identifies as a paranormal researcher, and so he had come in and shared video clips and things like that. That was fun. And we are looking for, possibly, if anybody wants to defend Christmas, there is a certain someone who wants to make the case that Christmas is, or no, not in particular, sorry, They want to make the case that Santa, not Christmas, more specifically, Santa is satanic. So if you are like, what? Like, I know a decent amount of the history of Santa, and there's no reason to think it's satanic. If you think that's bunk, well, then you might be the person that might be a good fit for debating that particular individual who's trying to make that case. But we want to say, we are excited as tomorrow, this First Amendment auditor debate will be a juicy one, and we are excited about all of these new debates. But I've got to tell you, one thing we're also excited about. My dear friends, you might be out there and you're like, James, what else are you excited about? What do you mean that you're excited? Let me tell you. One, did you know? And let me know in the chat. You don't have to say yes, because I know most of you have heard about this. We do have a podcast. If you didn't know, for example, I just opened up my favorite podcast app, Podcast Addict. I would encourage you right now, I know statistically most of you watch on your phones. That's what the actual Creator Studio stats tells me. And so I'd encourage you, hey, you got your phone in your hand right now maybe. You could click on your favorite podcast app, and then, amazing, you can find Modern Day Debate. Look at it there. Isn't that beautiful? This big black and blue beautiful logo, Modern Day Debate. That is our podcast. We are so excited, my dear friends, that it has been, I got to tell you some big stuff. One, it has been growing in terms of the amount of people who are like, yeah, I actually find it really useful. And I'm so encouraged because I'm like, that is so great. So we cut the music out from the beginning and, edit it just slightly so it's a little bit, more convenient for listening. And I'm just so encouraged, though, too. I'm not trying to brag. I give you guys the credit, because for real, you guys give us a lot of debate ideas. You guys help make the Q&A possible by asking your questions, as well as the debaters. We are so thankful for the debaters, as they are the lifeblood of the channel. So people like Jordan, Erika, and Benjamin, and even Neff, despite the fact that he left, we do appreciate the debaters, seriously. And I want to tell you, though, there is a recent list put out from FeedSpot. Now, FeedSpot's been around for a while in terms of the podcast stuff, and FeedSpot had 35 different podcasts that they ranked. We were ranked number 2, which is, I don't know what the metric was. I don't know if it was just a subjective ranking or if there was some sort of objective criteria that they were using. I am just so encouraged, though, that we were on that list. That's awesome. And so you guys, it is encouraging. And we also sometimes see people in the live chat who are like, oh yeah, I actually found you guys through the podcast. I didn't know you had a YouTube channel until you mentioned it in the podcast. And then I came over to the YouTube channel, which reminds me, folks, in the Twitch chat, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot to say hello in the old Twitch chat tonight. You guys, thanks for bearing with me. I really do appreciate you, for real. You guys in the old Twitch chat, I do want to say hello. Amazing. Let me say hi. So want to say we've got some big, cool stuff coming up in addition to tomorrow morning's debate. Wait, where is this? Twitch TV/modern. There we go. Okay. That's embarrassing. But I want to tell you, this conference that is coming up will knock your socks off. Want to say hello into the old Twitch chat. Thanks for being with us, Tapatzel, Brooks Sparrow, and Let's Farm. I see you there, as well as Chaos Soul. If you're still in there, want to say thanks for hanging out with us, as well as Top Dog Shattuck. And want to let you know, if you are on Twitch, one thing, we always encourage people to check out the Twitch, but we haven't done a great job of encouraging people. If you're watching on Twitch, don't forget to check us out on YouTube. We are excited. Whatever platform works best for you, we want to encourage you to check it out. Otangelo Grasso, good to see you there in the old live chat, as well as Sunflower and Human Girl, or Human Beta, as she likes to be called. Be Truthful, good to see you, as well as Edward Redbeard. Thanks for your question. Seriously, I do appreciate your sincere question. And I don't mean to shame anybody when I say that we're looking for sincere questions. I know that things get heated. I don't blame you. I've got no judgment. I get heated in life sometimes. And so I do want to say, I'm not trying to put anybody down when they have these kind of rhetorically cutting super chats, for example, when they, ask a question and they say, is it because your view is baloney? Or, I'm like, it's a bit much sometimes, but I don't want to put anybody down. It's more that the biggest thing is the worst thing is this. I don't mind if there's a sincere question and then it ends with something like, is it because your question, your belief is, your view is silly? Huh? I can deal with that because it at least also had a sincere question in the chat. But if it's something where it's just like, oh, so-and-so's dumb and your view is a fairy tale, I'm like, like we don't really want to read those. So I got to give you a heads up with your super chats. Do try to like refine them if you think that you're like, is this actually asking a sincere question that's substantive? I would encourage you to refine it before you send it, because we are looking for more of those, as we really want the quality of the Q&A. And like I said, I'd say 90% of you who put in a question for the Q&A, fantastic, superb. Where there wasn't even any sort of cutting rhetoric at all. And I appreciate that, because it was just a substantive, sincere question. And then, like I said, there's like maybe like 8% where it's like it's got a sincere question and then some cutting rhetoric, in which I'm like, yeah, I can deal with that. Like, but the ones that I'm just like, gosh, where it's just like, this is, your view is stupid. Like, you should quit. I'm like, okay, seriously? It sounds like the guy that works at the fast food on The Simpsons. But anyway, you know, like the teenager. But want to say, Jorgen Smorgan, thanks for being with us. I see you there in the old YouTube chat, as well as Topic Discuss. Thanks for coming by. It says, where is the Discord link? Well, let me get that for you. It's in our description box, but I'm going to throw it into the live chat right now as well. We do want to say Let's Farm has done a fantastic job of building up the Modern Day Debate Discord, and we want to encourage you to check that out if you happen to like Discord. We are so thankful for the people who have put in hard work to make that a fun community. And I got to be honest, all the credit it goes to them, because I'm rarely ever in the Discord, and the only reason is I'm a boomer. I can't figure it out. It's amazing how you young peeps, you young kids can figure it out. Now, I'll tell you, I'll share something from my personal life. One, if you're wondering how my comps exam went, I'm still waiting on the results. I'm kind of like I got my ringer on, because they'll actually call us after our comp exam is done and tell us like, hey, you passed or you didn't pass. And so I've got my ringer on, which is extremely rare. I don't think they're going to call this late, but I am waiting on the results. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, in my personal life, I'll tell you this. Well, Crazy Tactics, I see you there in the live chat, said, when is the Stefan versus Destiny debate happening? Stefan actually said he's taking some time away from debating. That's disappointing. I asked him for any sort of I said, hey, is there any way we can make this possible? I didn't get a response. So it's a bummer. I don't know what's going on. Who knows? It might be something. I don't want to speculate, but whatever it is, we've got no hard feelings. We're never entitled to host anybody. We do hope to host it someday, given that it was confirmed prior. And I think it was 2 days before Stefan backed out and said nope, I can't do it in November after all. And so we did advertise it, because, we usually only advertise when somebody's like, yep, I'll for sure come on by this date. And he didn't. So no hard feelings towards Stefan. Like I said, I hope everything's okay with him, whether if it's a family thing, I have no idea. Like I said, I don't want to speculate. Whatever it is, we hope he's doing okay. And same thing with Destiny. We hope he's doing okay, as we do appreciate both of them coming on the stream. We're hoping to have Steven Destiny on soon. And, Josiah Hansen sent a Pig Latin super chat. I didn't even realize that. Somebody was trying to explain to me how to do Pig Latin the other day, but I didn't even realize that, and so thanks for letting me know that. And Tinkle as well, or Tinkle Tink, as well as Patient Null. We're glad you were here, as well as Isidore Aries. We're glad you were with us. And Hack says based and woke. You said that, not me. Okay. And then Experiments in Prebiotic Chemistry, thanks for your kind words, says Experiments in Prebiotic, says thanks a lot, James. This was a good debate. Thanks for saying that. We're encouraged. I'm glad you said that and you enjoyed it as much as I did. Dr. Right Life, we're glad you were with us, as well as Human Girl says, it is amazing. Christmas carols incoming. And Andrew Kroll says, if you didn't hit the like, you are a beta. Hit that like button, folks. You might as well. I mean, since SoyTube removed the dislike count, because, that was a badge of honor for me, knowing that, hey, we have these debates, some of which got dislike bombed because, hey, we are always in the business of triggering people. And no, I'm kidding. I don't purposely trigger people, but it's funny how some people just really, oh boy, we do trigger some people, and we don't try, but it just comes natural to us. I don't know. But that's the thing. It is sometimes you're going to feel uncomfortable here. Sometimes you'll maybe even feel a little enraged. I sympathize. Sometimes I'm a little bit where I'm like, ugh. You saw it today where in the Q&A, I was like, okay, we want serious questions, please. So I've got to tell you, I get you. I know where you're coming from. And I'm looking up a debate right now. Let's see. I'm looking up the famous Nathan Thompson Aaron Raw debate. And the reason is I've got to see, where is this debate? I can't find it. I know it's listed. I don't know, like, how could I not find it? That's weird. Let me see here. Aaron Raw. So, and, because this was the debate that, where is this? Do we still have it? It's got to be here. Aaron Raw, Flat Earth. Let's see. That was the one. Here it is. That was the one that got dislike bombed. And now I'm looking at, oh, you can't see all the dislikes. Very sad, because we used to have an enormous amount of dislikes, and now all of our haters' hard work has gone to waste. Oh, I'm sad. The humanity. So yes, it's true. The dislike count is gone. YouTube, SoyTube, as they like to be called, I for real, even though I'm making fun of our haters, because a lot of them, I've seen people even like on like other places where they'll talk about modern day debate, and they're like, I just click in to leave a dislike. All of the times they did that, now it's gone to waste. But here, even though that's true, I gotta say, it was like a badge of honor. We kept those videos up just to say we're not taking them down. And there are one or two videos that even recently someone said, hey, would you take that down? That one really triggers me. Would you take it down? Nope. We keep it up. But Gel, thanks for coming by. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that right. Is the W silent? Amanda, good to see you. Andrew Kroll, thanks for coming by. Says James and T-Jump and Speedo's doing a car wash. We might actually be doing that because we are going to do a crowdfund. I've got to give you a heads up. We are planning Ozian, thank you so much for having given over 100 subs in Twitch. I hope you know we do appreciate your support. Seriously, big time. We really do appreciate it. So thanks for letting me know that in the old YouTube chat, as I am, like I said, behind on the old Twitch. And so thank you so much, Ozian, for your support. Seriously, that really does mean a lot. And Brooke Chavez, thanks for letting me know that. And gotta tell you, my dear friends, Edward Redbeard, thanks for being with us. So thanks for your kind words about the channel as well. And thanks for your kind words. Whereas I just saw somebody said something nice. But we do want to say, Jared A says, where's the bomb-ass merch at, James? You're right. I am behind on the merch. I'm sorry about that. We've got to update our merch because we still haven't gotten the new logo on the merch. For real, that's a priority for me. I've just been swamped. But Human Girl, good to see you. Let's see. Dr. Right Life, Samuel 99 Lillahome, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. And then let's see. Andrew Kroll says, kids, I just turned 53. No, actually, I'm not going to have kids. I was going to tell you in my personal life, I'm about to turn 35 in a month, which is crazy. You guys, that's nuts. For me, I'm like, I refuse to grow up. I am Robin Williams in the movie Hook. I'm not grown up. I am going to stay young and hip as long as humanly possible. When I think about 35, that's where it's like, whoa, I'm an adult. Like that's kind of like the age that I remember when I was in college. My landlord was 35, and I always thought, was like, wow, he's old. And I also thought, I'm never going to be like him. And in some ways, so now I'm really self-conscious about being like my old landlord, Mike Berg. And Mike, I don't know if you ever unless he stalks me, I don't think he'll ever hear this. In fact, I don't think he likes me. But I do like Mike. I like Mike, despite our differences that we had. Mike, no offense. It was just, I have to stay hip and young like Peter Pan. But anyway. Jared A says, where's the beanie at, yo? Maybe I should. Just to show how young I am. And Brooke Chavez says, let's get to 100 likes. Let's get to 180. Folks, we're at 177 likes. We can totally get to 180. It's only 3 more. Are you going to be one of those 3 people that get us to the 180 mark, as we can totally hit that goal? And I want to say thank you so much, though, for your support. Guys, seriously, I do appreciate it. Bill Passido says, Jesse Lee Coons, cut it out. That's funny. Amazing. And then thanks for your kind words, Gay Nomadic. Appreciate your support of the channel, as well as Jason PK. Appreciate your kind words. And then Jason PK says, memo to James, being impartial, etc. Long story short, sides with Neff. And I have no hard feelings against Neff. And I even considered, to give Neff credit, he did defer to Erika at one point prior to when he left, where he said, he's like, oh, go ahead, Erika, even though he clearly already wanted to speak. And he was deferential there. So to give him credit, I wasn't trying to shut him down for the whole debate. I wish he would have said, James, for real, in the grand sum, I know I've been going for about 3 minutes, but in the grand sum, I still haven't gotten more time, in which I could have, kind of compensated and said, okay, Neff, fair enough. What we'll do is we'll still jump back to Erika and Jordan, but I promise we'll come right back to you on the next one instead of Benjamin, for example, because Benjamin had gotten to talk early on when Neff didn't. And so I would concede that at that point it was in the big picture, Neff was still, he hadn't gotten a lot of time to talk yet, but the idea was just that we wanted to make sure that, like I said, the conversation was continuing to flow. But yeah, Jason PK, I would say, I do see that you're starting to copy and paste your grievance. And if you can do me a favor, I'm totally cool if you have criticism of modern day debate. That's okay. That's human, and we're not going to ban you for that or something. But I do want to say, can you do me a favor and just not do the copy and paste of it? And by the way, that also makes me wonder if you're one of NephilimFree's sock accounts, because NephilimFree was doing that earlier. But nonetheless, I do just want to mention Neph, whoever you are, please don't spam. It's whenever you do the copy and paste. And so we do want to say, Sarah Penix, thanks for coming by, as well as, let's see here. Amanda says, I'm not young, James. Well, there's advantages to getting older, and some of them I like. To be honest, so I asked my students this once. I said, and I've asked my friends this, and let me know what you guys think, because I think I've asked you guys this before. 2 seconds. I'm going to get this blazer off. Okay, it's my first time. All right, so what I was going to say was, you ready for this? I asked friends, would you go back and live your earlier years again? And I would not. The reason is, even though I enjoyed my younger years, I even enjoyed my middle school and high school years, which most of my friends didn't. Most of my friends were oh, it was like a prison. And I was I don't know, middle school and high school were fun. College is fun too, but I've enjoyed life in general. I think I've had a pretty good, I've enjoyed it, but I wouldn't go back. And I'm talking about going back without knowing what you know now. If you could go back and know what you know now, I mean, frankly, I still don't even think I would then. But I could get why in that case you might want to, because you'd be wow, think of all the things that I could take advantage of with basically knowing the future, if you went back in time and relived things. But imagine you didn't have all the info you know now. I wouldn't. I for sure wouldn't in that case. I am excited about kind of the growth and progress of life and getting older. I'm happy to get older, but I'm at the same time, I'm realizing I really am. And it's also, yeah, it's there are parts of it where it's just a little bit scary. It's a new part of life where it's I just part of it is that I worry about my parents. My parents are older, and I love my parents. I'm really thankful for them, and we have our differences as well. My parents and I, we don't agree on everything. In fact, we don't agree on a lot, but I love them. I'm so thankful for them, and I couldn't ask for more loving parents and more supportive parents. And so that's in another case, folks, where I tell you, you don't have to agree with everybody to be friends with them or even to love them. I am so thankful for my parents. And let's see, but they're getting older. They're okay, but I still just I'm thankful to have my parents around still, and I should be grateful because I know a lot of people don't have their parents around for as long as when they reach 35, and so I'm thankful. Don't get me wrong, but want to say in the old live chat, my dear friends, Spicy Roads, good to see you. Says SoyTube, haha, agreed. SoyTube deserves to be laughed at and scorned. But only because it is, I'm just like, ugh. Come on, YouTube, really? You're going to get rid of the dislikes? And it's like, oh yeah, because it might discourage people. We can still, as Creator Studio, like in the Creator Studio, we can still see how many dislikes a video gets. So if it's like, oh, well, we don't want the creator to be discouraged by how many dislikes they might get, it's like, they can still see them in the Creator Studio anyway. Now, people will probably be, because I get, you could say dislike bombs would be less motivated. People would be less motivated to, have their mob show up and dislike a video. And folks, we're almost to 190 likes. We're at 184. We're only 6 away. We can totally make it to 190, my dear friends. I want to say thanks for supporting the channel. We blew past the goal of 180 likes. Now we're at 184, so thank you for that. I was going to say, it's true that the dislike bomb mobs that go around and dislike videos, they're not just doing it to discourage the content creator. That's true. I understand that. They're also doing it because it's supposed to kind of like socially send a signal to people who are considering the video where like they're like, ooh, got 1 billion dislikes. Maybe I won't watch it. So I do agree that like dislike mobs, but at the same time, that's maybe a good signal. I know I've clicked on videos, for example, when I'm trying to figure out how to do something in Excel or in stats like in SPSS. I click on a video, and if I see it's got 1,000 dislikes and it's got like 8 likes, I know I'm like that like they clearly didn't give whatever they promised they would give in the thumbnail or the title. But want to say, Manic Panda is good to see you, as well as Perfect One, who says if you want to leave a dislike on a video now, you'll need to leave a comment saying that you disliked it. That way people will know. Hey, that's a good way of doing it. I like that. And Hannah Anderson says, I say let's get to 200. It's doable. Let's smash it. And we are at 188. So thank you so much for those of you who have already, the 4 of you that in just the last minute or so hit like. Thanks for your support, for real. And then let's see here. Flat Out Conspiracy, thanks for coming by. We are glad you are with us. And then Dan Pettinger, let me know if I'm pronouncing this right. We are glad you are here. And he says, stop inviting creationists and flat earthers. A lot of times they actually set up debates and they come on, like they say, James, we got this opponent. Can we come on and debate? And although we do sometimes invite people too. But I've got to say, the reason that we're not into the whole deplatforming thing is we believe that addressing an argument and giving a substantive response is the best way to expose that argument rather than trying to force it underground by saying we're not going to platform people anymore of this particular view. And the other thing is we really care about giving everybody a fair shot. And so if we say, oh, we're going to, these people, we're going to say, no, you're not allowed to come on. But these people, yeah, you are. That doesn't seem very neutral to me. That doesn't. And so it's true. I'm not a flat earther as an example. And there are a lot of views that I'm just pointing out flat earth because that's probably the most controversial one, ironically. Is there are a lot of views that I host or I don't agree with the guests, but nonetheless, like we host them and want to give them a fair shot, because if we're really going to claim to be a fair and neutral channel, we have to actually follow through with it. Because that's one thing I've noticed, and there's nothing that makes me more sick, and it's really sad, is that oftentimes I see people, for example, who will Oh, I'm all about tolerance. Yeah, I'm about tolerance. It's great. Oh, tolerant. We're so tolerant. And then there are certain groups, though, that they don't welcome and they purposely say, oh, no, they can't be here. Like, oh, they say that their view is the only correct view. That's intolerant. Get them out of here. And I'm like, I thought you were all about tolerance. Like, that means you got to tolerate even the people who say that their view is the only correct view. So I would say it really is important that we actually are willing to host everybody. And as long as, like I said, I'll be practical. We won't violate terms of service because YouTube has helped us grow immensely. Really. So we do appreciate them, and we don't want to we don't want to basically saw off the metaphorical YouTube growth branch that we're sitting on by violating their terms of service. That wouldn't be shrewd. We are encouraged that we are growing, and we're pumped about that, as we want to say, folks, we appreciate you. You are the reason that it's growing and that this movement has continued to grow and expand across YouTube. And I'm dead serious, you guys. You think I'm joking about this? Our goal, we are on a determined march by the end of the year to hit 60,000 subscribers. And then, no joke, by the end of 2022, to reach over 100,000 subscribers. No joke. And that's going to be here before you know it. We're going to be like, wow, like we're kind of big now, like over 100,000. That's a lot. And so I'm very serious about that. We have got big aspirations, my dear friends, and we are thankful to have you with us. Joshua Alec, good to see you, as well as, let's see here, Andrew Kroll, pumped you were with us, and Brooke Chavis says, Jason PK, please stop. James asked you to stop. It's true. Jason, please don't spam. If you want to do like criticism that's not spam, it's not copy and paste, like fair enough. But like when you copy and paste, it's like, it's just cringe. Let's see. Jason PK says, I'm an admirer of J.F. Gariepi, even though he's an evolutionist, so I want a debate to be done on fair and impartial terms, as even Dr. Gariepi himself would expect. Yeah, I think that, frankly, in terms of the grand total of minutes spoken by Neff, I would agree that he was kind of behind, and that's something that I would have been willing to make up for him. But it's true that it doesn't have to be made up all in one, like, response where Neff would get to speak for like 8 minutes in a row. Like, it could have been that, like I said, I was going to stop him at, I don't know, maybe he was at 3 minutes or so. I could have stopped him there and said, okay, Neff, we're going to go back to Erika. And then, but I promise, we can come right back to you. And we could have had Neff make up his time that way. But before even that could even be, it just had to be Neff's way of like, no, I'm going to get it to make all of it up right now with an 8-minute statement during open conversation. And that's where it's like, like you got to be flexible with us. So I get where you're coming from. I'm open to criticism and apologetics channels. Thanks for coming by. We are glad you are with us. And then Human Girl, I don't know if you guys know this, but Human Girl actually recently contacted me and she told me that she's a beta. And I was like, that's so sad that that you think of yourself like that. It's very sad. But I said, you gotta stop being so hard on yourself. So, give Human Girl some love, some positivity. And also, we just hit our goal of 190. Thank you, friends. We're at 190 likes. That's encouraging. We can get to 200. We're only 10 away from 200. And I've got to tell you, if you hit that like button, I will guarantee you that I will show you what is right next to and in front of me on my desk. Believe me, you do want to see this because it may surprise you. You might be like, oh, James, that's not what I expected. But I will show it to you, and believe me, you can probably hear it. Can you hear that? That was what it was. So I do want to say, you guys remember when I used to pull up the curtain and show you guys like what was behind the curtain? That was a fun game. I wish that I had a pet. That's what I really wish, is that I had a cute cat so that I could show you the cat. And I do love cats. I have to tell you, I love cats. I love dogs. And Ortho Mom, I love you, says, how is that a low bar? It's clear logic to me. I don't know what you're talking about, Ortho Mom, but we're glad you're here. So thanks for your support. And then, but yeah, let's see. Dr. Right Life says, I like debate on the platform to get dafitties. Is dafitties some sort of... Is this some sort of sexual innuendo? Like when someone was trying to tell me about a Cleveland steamer or what was a hot Carl or the Tokyo Sandblaster or taking grandma to Applebee's, like all these nasty innuendos. You guys, nasty guys, I'll tell you, very nasty. But yeah, we do want to encourage you. If you haven't gotten membership yet, I've got to find out. That reminds me, I've got to find out. In terms of memberships, I have to find out if we're able to get it so that we can do a stream. And I'm going to check this right now. If we can do a stream where... Oh, it actually reminds me of two things I've got to do. Let me do two things right now. Can we do a stream where it's both members only, but we could still share a link to it to people who are not members? I don't know. I got to find that out. I think it's not possible, but if anybody knows, let me know. Does anybody know? Do you know if you're already familiar with members only streams, can we do a members only stream where we can then share the link to it such that if you had the link, you wouldn't even have to be a member to watch it? I don't think that's available yet. That would be epic. I would love that, but I don't think YouTube likes that. And that's okay. We'll be all right. But let me look this up in the old analytics. I'm going to look up a couple of things. Nope, that's not actually what I was going to do. But I am excited, though, you guys, is that we have just been so thrilled and thankful that Modern Day Debate has just been growing and growing. Lately, I'm just like surprised at the growth. Like this last month, I'm like, we haven't had that many streams because I had that big comp exam. But nonetheless, like the growth has actually been like pretty steady. It's been going fast. And so that's really cool, as I'm like, wow, that's encouraging that people have found this channel valuable. And we're just thankful to you guys for all your support in making this channel grow as it has. As you know, like I said, you guys, seriously, I'm not just saying that. You guys have a very real part in helping the channel grow. We do appreciate that more than you know. It's amazing. But let's see here. The old Twitch chat. Brooke Sparrow, I see you saying hi there. And then let's see here. I've got to go in just a minute, but I want to say, like father, like son, thanks for coming by. We are glad you are with us. And then Brooke Chavez, Brooke Chavez was impressed at the number of innuendos that we've learned here at Modern Day Debate, including the old Cleveland steamer and Tokyo Sandblaster and taking grandma to Applebee's. I don't even know what the last two are, and I don't want to know. So I got to say, though, we do appreciate you guys, seriously. It's seriously, it's a fun time here. And I'm going to look at this. Let me look at this really quick. I'm in the, so I told you, I'm just super thankful that you guys help us in so many ways, you guys. I'm just thankful. I appreciate that. I was going to look into, okay, here are our stats for the last video we did. T-Jump versus Nadir. And let me look at how many, let's see, we've got channel pages, YouTube search, suggested videos. So 6.6% of our views on that video were from 0.06, 0.066 times 10,000. So 660 views on that video. So we get so many recommended videos. Our YouTube recommends our videos a lot. We're really thankful for that. That helps us grow a ton. And so that's one thing I got to give street cred to YouTube for, is we're thankful for that. And that's why we do follow terms of service. And I don't know why I'm amazed that some people are like, no, you should like break terms of service. And I'm like, well, why would we do that? Like, we have grown an awful lot thanks to YouTube. In fact, I got to say, like, if you want to grow on Twitch without starting on YouTube, it is a long uphill battle. I was listening to somebody talk about this the other day. He's grown on both platforms, and he said it's way harder on Twitch. You just don't have nearly as many ways that YouTube recommends you to other people. And then, let's see here. How do I find the number of shares that people have done on a single video? Because we have had a ton. And that's something I'm looking for, is how many times people have shared the video. You'd think it would be an overview. There are 5,000 chats in that debate. That's a lot. But Want to say thank you guys for real. I'm going to let you go. Want to say I love you guys. Thanks for all of your support. Seriously, it's like a family here. Appreciate all of your support. I got to let you know, we what was I going to say? I'm just laughing at Gay Nomadic, who just Googled Cleveland Steamer, is we are excited, and we're going to launch the crowdfund soon. I've got to tell you, I got to give you a heads up. Let me mentally prep you. The crowdfund is going to work like this. Some of the, oh, don't worry, I'm still here, is some of the debates will, for the conference in January, will be live streamed. And some of them you would be able to live stream and watch them live if you have either one, if you're a Patreon patron, or if you have put into the Google, what's the word I'm looking for? If you have put into the Google, or if you were a YouTube member of the channel, or if you happen to sleep well, Bob, thanks for saying good night. And I don't know if I want to know what Tokyo Sandblaster is. Brooke apparently Googled it. I don't want to know. Is what I was going to say is, good night, Chris. Thanks for your kind words. Sleep well. Is for some of the streams, we would ask that people, in order to view some of the streams during the conference, that they would put into the crowdfund. As basically, you would get to watch some of the streams live if you don't put into the crowdfund, but not all of them. Some of them we were saying, if you put into the crowdfund, we would be willing to we'll send you the link to watch it live. And that's basically how we would do some of the debates. And that helps us fund the event, as we're taking a big risk here, folks. I mean, like, seriously, the budget in terms of what's going to be spent on this, I'm anticipating about $20,000, maybe 25. I don't know, like, in terms of the flights, the hotel nights, the food for the speakers, in terms of not just the hotel nights, but also the lot, like the build or the ballroom that we want to rent out for the actual speaking. Like, this is a big deal, and so that's why we are going to have a crowd fund that is going to be epic, and that is going to help kind of cushion us as we try to. We're going to sell tickets as well. But at the same time, like I said, we're like, hey, we don't know how this is going to go. So we're trying to be as careful and, shrewd as we can. But shrewd just means wise, careful, planning. Extra delight. Thanks for coming by. We are glad you were here. And then in the old live chat, let's see. But yeah, Nick Ross, thanks for coming by. I see you there in the old live chat. And want to say, seriously, my dear friends, we love you guys. HL? Aristoteles, thanks for coming by. We seriously appreciate you hanging out here, as well as Master Optics and Serpenix. Thanks for dropping in. We love you guys. Seriously, thanks for all your support of the channel. We are excited about the future, and seriously, we appreciate you guys. We're excited about big things in the future. We're going to take some big leaps. It's going to be epic and amazing as we strive to fulfill, and we are determined as we will fulfill the vision of providing a neutral platform so that everybody can make their case on a level playing field. With that, I want to say thanks, everybody. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your night, and excited to see you next time tomorrow morning for this juicy debate that you can see right now. My dear friends, you see that right there? Bottom right of the screen. First Amendment auditor debate. You don't want to miss it. Thanks, everybody, and keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable.